The forests of America hold secrets older than the country itself. Beneath the pines, beyond the ranger stations, past the last marked trail, something watches. Something waits. For decades, park rangers have whispered the same names around dying campfires. Bigfoot, stalking the ridges of the Pacific Northwest. The Mothman, with eyes like burning coals. The Wendigo, hungering in the snow. The skinwalker, wearing a face that isn't its own. The Dogman, the not deer. The fleshgate that calls your name in your brother's voice. Welcome to Mr. Belko, where every legend is a warning, and every shadow remembers your name. Tonight's story is real. Tonight's witness survived, barely. So lock your doors, dim your lights, and whatever you hear outside your window after this video ends, do not answer it. When I first accepted the position as a park ranger at Kenai Wilderness, I told myself it was for the solitude. After spending 3 years working a desk job in Anchorage that slowly drained my spirit, the prospect of living in the remote Alaskan wilderness seemed like salvation. The truth was more complicated. I was running from something, memories, people, a life that no longer fit. My grandmother, who raised me after my parents died, called me Makya. It means one who hunts wolf in Hopi, a name that now felt like a premonition. She had passed 2 winters ago, taking with her the last connection to my heritage. In her final days, she spoke of the old stories, warning me to remember the balance between our world and what lies beyond the veil of reality. I hadn't understood then. The posting was considered undesirable by most rangers. A remote outpost at the northernmost edge of the park, 30 miles from the nearest ranger station, accessible only by helicopter or a grueling 2-day hike through dense forest and mountain passages. The previous ranger had left suddenly, citing personal reasons in his resignation letter. The regional supervisor seemed relieved when I volunteered. "You sure about this, Makya?" Ranger Patterson asked during my final briefing. "That cabin's been empty for months. Radio contact gets spotty up there during storms, and winter's coming early this year." "I need the space," I replied, not meeting his concerned gaze. "The isolation doesn't bother me." He studied my face for a moment. "There's isolation, and then there's Blackrock Ridge. Just keep in regular contact, all right? And don't hesitate to call for extraction if things get too much." The cabin was more spacious than I'd expected. A main room with a wood stove, kitchenette, and desk area, a small bedroom, and a storage room filled with equipment. Solar panels provided limited electricity, and a shortwave radio sat on the desk for communications. The windows offered panoramic views of ancient spruce forests stretching to distant snow-capped mountains. My duties were straightforward: monitor wildlife activity, maintain trails, assist any hikers, though few ventured this far, and report any unusual activities, primarily poachers or illegal mining operations. Simple work that would give me plenty of time to heal from whatever I was running from. The first 2 weeks passed uneventfully. I settled into a routine: morning patrols, afternoon maintenance, evenings spent reading by the wood stove or stargazing from my porch. The profound silence was occasionally broken by wolf howls or the haunting calls of great horned owls. I filled my journal with notes about animal tracks, changing foliage, and the gradual shift toward winter. The nightmares began on the 17th night. I dreamed of running through endless trees, pursued by something I couldn't see but sensed behind me, something that wasn't animal or human but something in between. I woke gasping, sweat-soaked despite the cabin's chill. Outside, the wind had picked up, whispering through tree branches like distant conversations. The following day, I discovered the first anomaly, a series of tracks circling my cabin. They resembled wolf prints, but were larger, with an unusual gait pattern suggesting a strange, loping walk. I photographed them, made plaster casts, and reported the finding in my daily check-in, attributing them to an unusually large wolf. That evening, as darkness descended early in the Alaskan autumn, I heard something moving outside. The footsteps were too deliberate for an animal, too irregular for a human. They circled the cabin, pausing occasionally as if listening. When I gathered the courage to shine my flashlight through the window, nothing was there, just swaying trees and the beginning flurries of an early snow. The radio crackled to life unexpectedly. "Find it yet, Makya?" The voice was fragmented, distorted by static. I hadn't initiated contact. "This is Ranger Makia. Who am I speaking with?" More static, then. "Coming for you. Knows you're alone." The transmission cut off. I attempted to reach the main station but received only static in return. The storm must have been interfering with communications. That night, I double-checked the locks on my doors and windows, loaded my service pistol, and kept it within reach as I tried unsuccessfully to sleep. In the darkness, I could have sworn I heard breathing outside my bedroom window. Not the huffing of a bear or the panting of a wolf, but the measured breath of something trying very hard to sound human without quite managing it. Dawn broke with surprising clarity after the snowstorm. 6 inches of pristine white covered everything, creating an almost supernatural stillness. I suited up for my morning patrol, service pistol holstered at my hip, bear spray in my pocket, and a hunting knife strapped to my leg, standard equipment for Alaska Rangers, though this morning they provided additional comfort. The tracks were there again, the same unusual pattern, but now they led away from the cabin toward the North Ridge. Against better judgment, I decided to follow them. As a ranger, investigating unusual wildlife activity was part of my job. At least, that's what I told myself. The trail led through increasingly dense forest, areas I hadn't yet fully explored during my short tenure. The trees grew older here, massive trunks twisted into grotesque shapes by centuries of harsh weather. Moss hung like funeral shrouds, and the snow beneath the canopy was thinner, revealing patches of black soil that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 3 miles in, I found the remains of a moose. The kill was fresh, perhaps from the previous night, but something was wrong about it. Predators in these woods, wolves, bears, occasionally mountain lions, killed efficiently but messily. This carcass had been opened with almost surgical precision, specific organs removed while others remained untouched. The blood pattern suggested the animal had been drained deliberately. I photographed everything, collected samples, and marked the coordinates on my GPS. This would need to be reported immediately upon return. As I packed up my equipment, the forest fell silent. The constant background chorus of birds and small creatures suddenly ceased, leaving a vacuum of sound that made my ears ring. Something was watching me. I turned slowly, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved, yet the sensation of being observed intensified. My training told me to make noise, to appear large and aggressive, standard procedure for potentially dangerous wildlife encounters. But instinct told me to remain absolutely still. Between 2 ancient spruce trees, approximately 50 yards away, something shifted. At first, I thought it was a shadow, a trick of light filtering through branches. Then it moved again, and I glimpsed what appeared to be the silhouette of a person standing upright, but proportioned all wrong, limbs too long, head slightly misshapen. "Hello?" I called, hand moving to my pistol. "This is Park Ranger Makia. Identify yourself." The figure remained motionless for several heartbeats, then dropped to all fours, with a fluidity no human could manage, and loped away between the trees, moving too quickly for me to track. My radio crackled again as I hurried back toward the cabin, the forest seeming to close in around me. Through the static, I heard fragments. "Found his journal. Don't trust." Then, more clearly, "Get out, Makia. It knows your name now." I broke into a run, the overwhelming feeling of pursuit driving me forward. By the time I reached the cabin, sweat had frozen against my skin despite the exertion. I locked the door behind me, hands shaking as I tried to establish radio contact with headquarters. "This is Ranger Makia at Blackrock Outpost, requesting immediate contact, over." After several attempts, a response came through, mercifully clear. "This is headquarters. Go ahead, Makia. I need to report unusual wildlife activity and a suspicious person in my patrol area," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Say again? You're breaking up." "I said I need to report—" I stopped mid-sentence. On my desk lay an unfamiliar notebook, aged and weathered. It hadn't been there when I left that morning. The cabin door had been locked. With the radio still in hand, I approached it cautiously. The book was a journal, the handwriting frantic and increasingly disorganized as the pages progressed. The name inside the cover, Ranger Kyle Blackwood, my predecessor. "Makia, are you there?" The voice from the radio pulled me back. "Yes, sorry. Storm interference. Everything's fine. Just checking in. Over. I couldn't explain why I lied. That night I read Blackwood's journal by lantern light as wind howled outside. His entries began normally enough. Wildlife observations, weather patterns, routine reports. Then, 6 months in, the tone changed. Tracks again this morning. Not wolf, not bear. Regional office says I'm imagining things. 2 weeks later. It's watching the cabin, stands at the tree line after sunset. When I approach, it's gone. The entries became increasingly paranoid, describing whispering voices, objects moving within the cabin, and a persistent smell like wet fur and copper. The final entry, dated just 3 days before his sudden resignation, simply read, "It's wearing Watson's face now. Watson's been dead 3 years. I'm next." I closed the journal, hands trembling. Watson had been the ranger before Blackwood, who had died in what was officially recorded as a hiking accident. His body found at the bottom of a ravine after he failed to check in for 3 consecutive days. Outside, something scratched lightly at my bedroom window, like fingernails testing the glass. Morning brought no relief. Heavy clouds hung low, threatening more snow, and the temperature had dropped significantly overnight. I radioed headquarters to request information about Rangers Blackwood and Watson, citing historical record-keeping as my reason. "Not much to tell," the administrator replied. "Watson died in a fall 3 years back. Blackwood resigned suddenly about 8 months ago, turned in his badge and disappeared. Haven't heard from him since. Why?" I considered telling the truth about the tracks, the strange figure, the journal that had appeared mysteriously in my locked cabin. Something stopped me. "Just curious about the outpost's history," I said instead. "Any chance you could send me their personnel files?" "That's against protocol, Makya. You know that." After signing off, I carefully examined the cabin. In daylight, everything appeared normal, though the lingering sense of wrongness remained. I decided to check the storage room more thoroughly, looking for anything Blackwood might have left behind. Behind several boxes of emergency supplies, I found a sealed plastic container. Inside were research materials, printouts of news articles, folklore books, and handwritten notes. Blackwood had been investigating local indigenous legends, particularly those concerning a creature called the Wendigo, a malevolent spirit that possessed humans, causing them to crave human flesh and giving them supernatural abilities. According to one account, Wendigos could mimic human voices and eventually take on the appearance of those they had killed or possessed. They were drawn to isolation, greed, and despair, feeding on the weakness of those already separated from human connection. I pushed the materials away, telling myself these were just stories, the research of a man who had clearly suffered some kind of psychological break from extended isolation. Yet I couldn't shake the image of that figure I'd seen in the woods, nor explain the mysterious appearance of the journal in my locked cabin. The radio crackled again, the same distorted transmission I'd heard before. Coming closer, wearing their skins, I switched frequencies, trying to clear the interference. A different voice came through, disturbingly familiar, though I couldn't place it. "Makya, can you hear me, Makya? I'm hurt. I need help." The voice sounded like someone I knew, but the name danced just beyond my recall. "Who is this? Identify yourself." "It's me, Makya, please. I'm at the North Ridge Trail. I fell. I can't move. Please hurry." Protocol dictated that I respond to any distress call immediately, but something felt wrong. "State your name and nature of your emergency." Static hissed. Then, "You know who this is, Makya. Don't you remember me? We grew up together." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the cabin's temperature. I'd grown up on the reservation with only a handful of close friends, none of whom would be in these woods. "I'm sending your coordinates to headquarters for a search and rescue team," I replied, maintaining protocol while reaching for my emergency beacon. The voice changed, dropping an octave and gaining a wet, guttural quality. "No need. I'll find you instead." The transmission ended abruptly. I immediately contacted headquarters on the emergency channel, reporting a suspicious transmission and possible impersonation of a distressed hiker. They promised to send a patrol from the nearest station, but the growing storm meant they wouldn't arrive until the following day at earliest. I spent the afternoon securing the cabin, checking windows, barricading the storage room door which led to a cellar I hadn't yet explored, and taking inventory of potential weapons. As darkness fell early, I positioned myself in the main room with clear sight lines to all entry points, service pistol loaded, with Blackwood's research spread before me. One passage from an anthropologist's field notes caught my attention. The elders speak of the Wendigo's patience. It doesn't merely hunt, it plays with its prey, isolating them physically and mentally until they begin to doubt their own sanity. By the time the victim realizes the danger, it's already too late. They've been claimed. Outside, the wind picked up, driving snow against the windows with increasing force. Between gusts, I heard what sounded like multiple sets of footsteps circling the cabin. Some heavy like a large animal, others light and precise like a human. The radio came to life again, but this time it was headquarters. The transmission clear, despite the storm. Makia, we've been reviewing historical records after your inquiry. There's something you should know about Blackwood. After his resignation, he was admitted to a psychiatric facility in Anchorage. He escaped 3 months ago. His current whereabouts are unknown. My mouth went dry. And Watson? The ranger before him? A pause. Watson's body was never recovered from the ravine. The search was called off due to dangerous conditions. Only his backpack and some torn clothing were found. As the gravity of this information sank in, the lights flickered and died as the solar power system failed in the storm. In the sudden darkness, illuminated only by my emergency lantern, I heard a sound that stopped my heart. The unmistakable click of the front door latch, turning slowly. In the dim lantern light, I watched in horror as the door handle turned inch by inch. My fingers tightened around my pistol as I crouched behind the desk, using it as a barricade. The wind howled, momentarily drowning out all other sounds. When it subsided, the door handle had stopped moving. Seconds stretched into minutes of absolute stillness. Then came a light tapping on the window, rhythmic, deliberate, like someone trying to establish a code. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. I know you're inside, Makia. The voice was just outside the window now, no longer needing the radio to reach me. It sounded almost normal, a man's voice, calm and reasonable. I just want to talk, ranger to ranger. I remained silent, controlling my breathing, finger resting alongside the trigger guard of my pistol. It's Blackwood, Kyle Blackwood. I came back when I heard they'd stationed someone new at the outpost. You're in danger here. The name sent ice through my veins. Blackwood, the previous ranger who'd allegedly been committed to a psychiatric facility. The man whose journal had mysteriously appeared in my locked cabin. If you're Blackwood, what was the name of your service dog? I called out, remembering a photograph I'd seen in his personnel file during orientation, a ranger smiling beside a German shepherd. A pause, too long. Ranger, you're confused. I never had a dog. He was right. The file had shown Blackwood with a falcon. He'd been part of a raptor rehabilitation program. No dog. It was a trick question, and whatever was outside had failed. The tapping at the window stopped. For a moment, I thought perhaps it had given up. Then I heard a new sound that turned my stomach, the scrape of claws on the roof, moving toward the chimney. I scrambled to close the wood stove's flue, securing it just as something large and heavy landed inside the chimney with a thud. Scratching sounds followed, then an inhuman howl of frustration that vibrated through the metal of the stove. Whatever was up there began pounding on the roof, the impact so violent that dust and debris rained from the ceiling. I retreated to the bedroom, dragging the desk chair behind me to wedge under the doorknob. The radio crackled again from the main room where I'd left it. Makia? A woman's voice this time, professional and concerned. This is dispatch. The patrol team is delayed by the storm. Estimated arrival is now 0800 tomorrow. Do you copy? I couldn't reach the radio without venturing back into the main room. The pounding on the roof had stopped, but a new sound had taken its place. A slow, methodical scratching at multiple points around the cabin. It was testing for weaknesses. Night deepened around the feeble glow of my emergency lantern. The temperature dropped steadily as the wood stove went cold. I huddled in the corner of the bedroom, pistol ready, listening to the intermittent scratching and occasional whispers that seemed to come from inside the walls themselves. Around midnight, a new tactic began. The voice returned, but now it cycled through different tones and timbres, as if trying each on like a garment. Help me, please. I'm hurt. A child's voice, frightened and small. Ranger, do you copy? We've reached your position. a perfect imitation of standard ranger protocol. "Makya, it's your grandmother. Why didn't you listen to my warnings?" This one froze my blood. The intonation was perfect, the slight accent exactly as I remembered. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the voices continued, seemingly inside my head now. I fought to remember my training, wildlife encounters, survival situations, psychological first aid. None of it prepared me for this. In my desperation, I turned to Blackwood's journal again, flipping to the final pages I hadn't yet read. "It can't enter unless invited," one passage read. "It needs permission, through fear, despair, or direct invitation. The elders say iron repels it, and that speaking its true name robs it of power. But Watson made the mistake of trying to name it, and now he's part of it. Iron." I glanced around the room. The bed frame was aluminum, the furnishings wood and plastic. My knife was stainless steel, not iron. Then I remembered. The fireplace poker in the main room was cast iron, an antique piece probably left from when the cabin was first built. I needed to reach it, but that meant returning to the main room where the scratching sounds were now concentrated. As if sensing my thoughts, the bedroom window exploded inward in a shower of glass and snow. I fired 2 shots toward the opening before I could even process what I was seeing. A pale limb, too long to be human, withdrawing rapidly into the night. Using the momentary advantage, I kicked away the chair, threw open the bedroom door, and sprinted for the fireplace tools. My fingers had just closed around the heavy iron poker when something crashed through the front door. The creature that entered was nightmarish, vaguely humanoid but wrong in every detail. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, emaciated yet powerful, with skin stretched tight over an elongated frame. Its face contained elements I recognized from multiple sources. Blackwood's square jaw, what might have been Watson's eyes, and other features I couldn't identify but that seemed disturbingly familiar. Antlers or sharp bone protrusions emerged from its skull, and its fingers extended into vicious claws. It moved with unnatural speed, crossing the room in a blur. I swung the iron poker with all my strength, connecting with its outstretched arm. A shriek of pain erupted from its throat as the iron made contact, the flesh sizzling where the metal touched. It recoiled, circling me warily now. "You can't keep me out forever, Makya," it said, the voice a grotesque blend of many others. "I am patient. I have claimed this territory for generations." "What do you want?" I demanded, keeping the poker between us. Its mouth twisted into what might have been a smile, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. "Company. It gets lonely out here. I want what Watson gave me, what Blackwood refused. Acceptance." "Watson's dead," I challenged. The creature's laugh was like ice cracking. "Is he?" "Parts of him. The rest lives in me, his memories, his essence. He serves a greater purpose now." It lunged suddenly, faster than I could react. Claws raked across my ribs as I stumbled backward, leaving burning lines of pain. I swung the poker again, catching it across the face. It howled, flesh smoking from the contact. The radio burst to life with static, momentarily distracting us both. Through the distortion came a clear transmission. "Makya, this is rescue team. We've advanced our timeline. ETA 20 minutes. Do you copy?" The creature's expression shifted to something like concern. It looked toward the window, seeming to calculate. Then it fixed its gaze on me again. "They won't find you if I don't want them to." Its voice lowered. "But we can make a deal, ranger to ranger. Give me permission to visit you. Just that. I won't harm you if you accept me." "Never," I spat. Blood running warm down my side from the claw wounds. Its face contorted with rage. It moved toward me again, but hesitated as truck engines became audible in the distance. With a final, hateful glance, it retreated toward the broken door. "This isn't over, Makya," it hissed. "You'll call for me eventually, when the loneliness becomes too much. They all do." Then it was gone, leaving me trembling in the wreckage of the cabin as approaching headlights cut through the darkness outside. The rescue team found me half-conscious, still clutching the iron poker, surrounded by broken furniture and my own blood. They treated my wounds, 3 deep lacerations across my ribs that would require proper medical attention, and secured the cabin as best they could against the ongoing storm. "What happened here?" The team leader, Ranger Rivera, asked as the medic bandaged my side. I hesitated. The truth would sound like the ravings of a man suffering from isolation psychosis. Exactly what they probably suspected had happened to Blackwood. Animal attack, I said finally. Broke through the door during the storm. Some kind of wolf, maybe a wolverine. It was dark. Rivera's expression showed he didn't quite believe me, but wasn't going to press further. We'll evacuate you at first light when the helicopter can fly. Storm's expected to break by dawn. They offered to take shifts guarding the cabin overnight. I accepted gratefully, finally allowing myself to collapse into exhausted sleep while 2 rangers kept watch in the main room. Dreams came immediately, fragmented and distorted. I was running through the forest, but I was both pursuer and pursued. I looked down at hands that weren't mine, felt hunger that went beyond physical need. I saw faces reflected in still pools of water. Blackwood, a man I assumed was Watson, others I didn't recognize. All wore expressions of terror frozen in their final moments. I woke with a start as dawn light filtered through the boarded-up window. The storm had passed, leaving pristine silence in its wake. Rivera stood in the doorway. "Helicopter's 15 minutes out," he said. "We need to talk before it gets here." He sat on the edge of the bed, expression grave. "We found something while securing the perimeter. I think you should see it before we leave." He led me outside where the other rangers were packing equipment. The snow around the cabin was churned and bloodied from the previous night's events. Rivera pointed to a series of tracks leading away from the cabin. "Those match what you reported as unusual wolf prints, correct?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "And these?" He indicated a second set of prints, unmistakably human, that paralleled the animal tracks before merging with them about 20 yards from the cabin. "I don't understand," I said, though a terrible suspicion was forming. Rivera reached into his jacket and produced a weathered ranger badge. "Found this half buried near those merged tracks. It's Blackwood's." The implications hung between us, unspoken. Either Blackwood had been here, working with some kind of animal, or... "There's more," Rivera continued reluctantly. "Headquarters radio log shows no outgoing transmission to you last night. No patrol was scheduled to reach you until this morning, which is us." "But I heard..." I stopped, remembering the voices, the perfect imitation of Ranger protocol. Rivera studied my face. "The medical evac isn't just for your injuries, Makia. They want you evaluated for possible psychological effects of isolation. Standard procedure." The distant thump of helicopter rotors saved me from having to respond. As the aircraft appeared over the tree line, Rivera placed a hand on my shoulder. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're crazy. My grandfather was Tlingit. He told stories about these woods, about things that hunt by becoming what their prey trusts most." He pressed something into my hand, a small pouch of herbs and what felt like iron filings. "Keep this with you, just in case." The helicopter ride to Anchorage passed in a blur of pain medication and exhaustion. At the hospital, doctors treated my wounds, expressing surprise at the depth and precision of the cuts. "More like knife wounds than any animal claws I've seen," one commented. The psychological evaluation was thorough, but inconclusive. I maintained my story about an animal attack, keeping Blackwood's journal and research hidden in my pack. They had no grounds to hold me, but strongly recommended extended leave before returning to ranger duties. 2 days later, cleared for release, I found Regional Director Harlow waiting in my hospital room. His expression was unreadable as he closed the door behind him. "How much do you remember about your application interview, Makia?" he asked without preamble. The question caught me off guard. "Most of it, I think. Why?" "You specifically requested Blackrock Outpost. Said you had unfinished business there. When I pointed out the station's history of difficulties, you insisted." I stared at him, a cold sensation spreading through my chest. "No, you assigned me there. I volunteered when no one else would take it." Harlow shook his head. "We have it recorded. You were quite adamant." He placed a folder on the bed. "Your personnel file. Review it before making any decisions about your future with the service." After he left, I opened the folder with trembling hands. There was my application, my psychological evaluation, my training certifications. And there, attached to the interview notes, was a photograph I had no memory of. me standing before Blackrock cabin, smiling confidently at the camera. The date stamp showed it had been taken 3 years ago during Watson's tenure. I had never been to Blackrock before my assignment 2 months ago. I would have remembered. Unless my grandmother's warnings about things beyond the veil. The creatures claimed that parts of Watson lived within it. The strange sense of recognition I'd felt upon arriving at the outpost. With growing horror, I pulled out Blackwood's journal and flipped to a page I hadn't fully processed before. It doesn't just take your body, it takes pieces of your memory, your identity. It plants seeds in your mind that grow into false recollections, driving you back to its hunting grounds when it needs you. I'm fighting it, but I feel my mind fragmenting. I've left this journal as a warning, hidden where only someone already touched by it would think to look. The cabin's storage room. Behind supplies I had somehow known to move aside. Looking up, I caught my reflection in the hospital room window. For a moment, just a flicker, I saw something else looking back at me. Something with my face, but not my eyes. Patient and hungry, waiting for the seeds it had planted to bloom. 6 months passed. I left the Ranger Service, citing personal reasons, and returned to Anchorage. I took an office job with a tourism company, found an apartment downtown, and tried to convince myself that what happened at Blackrock had been the product of isolation, stress, and perhaps an undiagnosed psychological condition. The nightmares continued. Vivid dreams of running through moonlit forests on all fours, of watching human figures through windows, of hunger no normal food could satisfy. I saw therapists, took medication, even joined a support group for PTSD sufferers. Nothing helped. The dreams became more detailed, more insistent. I began to sleepwalk, once waking to find myself 6 blocks from my apartment, barefoot in the snow, with no memory of how I got there. Another time, my neighbor reported seeing me standing motionless in the hallway at 3 a.m., staring at her door for nearly an hour. I received unmarked packages containing items from the cabin, pine needles, wood splinters, once a partial animal jawbone. No return address, no explanation. Police investigations led nowhere. Then the radio in my apartment began picking up transmissions it shouldn't have been able to receive. Time to come home, Makya. Your place is waiting. I changed apartments, changed jobs, even briefly considered leaving Alaska altogether. But something kept me here, an inexplicable certainty that running wouldn't solve anything. Research became my obsession. I tracked down indigenous elders, anthropologists, paranormal investigators, anyone who might have information about the creature I'd encountered. Most dismissed me as disturbed, but a few listened. One Athabascan elder studied me with ancient eyes before refusing to speak further, making warning signs as I left. A professor of cultural anthropology at the university was more helpful, though skeptical. What you're describing resembles the Wendigo of Algonquian folklore, but with elements of other mythological shapeshifters, she explained. These stories served as metaphorical warnings against isolation and taboo behaviors. In psychological terms, they represent the fear of losing one's humanity, of becoming other. This wasn't metaphorical, I insisted, showing her my scarred ribs. She examined the marks clinically. Bear attack victims often report unusual or supernatural elements to their experiences. Trauma affects memory formation. I nearly left, but her next words stopped me. However, there is a researcher you might want to contact. Dr. Navarro studies what she calls folklore clusters, instances where similar legends appear across unconnected cultures. She has a particular interest in your region. Dr. Eleanor Navarro agreed to meet me at a coffee shop the following day. She was younger than I expected, intense and focused. She listened to my story without interruption, taking occasional notes. "You're not the first ranger to report these experiences," she said when I finished. "I've documented 17 similar accounts from various northern wilderness areas over the past 30 years. Most were dismissed as cabin fever or psychotic breaks." "You believe me?" I asked, hardly daring to hope. "I believe you experienced something traumatic that matches a pattern I've been tracking. Whether it's supernatural or psychological isn't my primary concern." She studied my face. "The more important question is, what do you plan to do about it?" "Do? I'm trying to forget it ever happened." She shook her head. "That approach has a 0% success rate in my data. Every person who's tried to ignore these experiences has either ended up institutionalized or disappeared. What's the alternative? Confront it. On your terms, not its. The pattern suggests these entities, whatever they are, operate by rules. They need invitation. They're territorial. They're patient, but not omnipotent. She slid a file across the table. These are accounts from the small percentage who survived their second encounter. Study them. Find the commonalities. That night I read every page. The stories spanned decades and continents, but shared disturbing similarities: isolation, mimicry, progressive psychological deterioration, followed by an irresistible compulsion to return to the encounter site. Those who resisted longest suffered most severely. Only 3 accounts described successful resolutions. In each case, the individual returned voluntarily to face the entity, armed with some form of protection derived from their research: ritual objects, iron weapons, or, in one case, a recording device that apparently disrupted the creature's mimicry abilities. Most disturbing was the consistent description of what happened when the entity finally claimed a victim. It didn't simply kill them, but somehow absorbed aspects of their identity, using these fragments to lure others later. Had it taken something from me during our encounter? Was that why I couldn't remember applying specifically for Blackrock Outpost or explain the photograph I had no memory of? The dreams intensified over the following weeks. I began to find notes in my own handwriting that I had no recollection of writing. The North Trail is beautiful in spring. The cabin needs new roof supports before winter. You promised to return. It's waiting. I lost weight, unable to eat without feeling nauseated. The hunger that plagued me felt different, a hollowness no food could fill. My colleagues began to avoid me, disturbed by my appearance and erratic behavior. The decision, when it came, felt less like a choice and more like acceptance of an inevitable truth. I would return to Blackrock, but I would do so prepared. I spent weeks gathering supplies: iron implements, recording equipment, cameras, protective symbols from 6 spiritual traditions, and weapons both conventional and esoteric. Dr. Navarro helped, though she seemed troubled by my determination. The accounts suggest confrontation can work, but the risk is enormous, she warned. If you insist on going, take this. She handed me a satellite phone. It's programmed with my number. Call when you arrive, then every 6 hours. If you miss a check-in, I'll send help. The journey back to Blackrock was surreal. I hired a private bush pilot to take me within hiking distance, telling him I was conducting wildlife research. He seemed nervous about the location, but didn't ask questions beyond the essential. As I approached the cabin on foot, a strange calm settled over me. The forest seemed to welcome me, the path more familiar than it should have been after only 2 months' residency. I found myself automatically avoiding certain areas, taking routes I couldn't consciously recall learning. The cabin stood unchanged, the damage from my last night there repaired as if it had never happened. Inside, everything was immaculate. No dust, no signs of abandonment. The wood stove contained fresh kindling. The desk held neatly arranged logbooks. My replacement uniforms hung in the closet. It had been waiting for me. I set up my equipment methodically, cameras covering every approach, iron filings across thresholds, recording devices active. Then I sat at the desk and switched on the radio. "I'm here," I said simply. No response came through the speaker, but the temperature in the cabin dropped noticeably. Outside, twilight deepened toward night with unnatural speed. I checked my satellite phone. No signal, despite the clear sky. Dr. Navarro wouldn't receive my check-in. No help would come. As darkness claimed the forest completely, I heard what I'd been both dreading and anticipating: footsteps in the snow, approaching the cabin. Not the strange, loping gait I remembered, but the measured stride of a person walking confidently toward a destination. The footsteps stopped at the door. No knock came. It was waiting for an invitation. "I know what you are," I called out. "I know what you've taken from me." A voice replied, my own voice, perfect in every detail. "Then you know why you came back. Part of you never left." My hand went to the iron poker I'd placed beside me. "I came to reclaim what's mine." "Did you?" "Look at your notes, Makia. The ones you don't remember writing." I glanced down at the desk, where open logbooks contained page after page of entries in my handwriting, detailed descriptions of patrols I'd never taken, wildlife observations from seasons I hadn't experienced, maintenance tasks I'd never performed. "This isn't real," I said, but doubt crept into my voice. "Neither are you, not completely. You've been fractured since our first encounter. Part of you returned to the human world. Part of you remained here, with me. Both believe they are the original." Cold sweat broke across my skin. "You're lying. This is how you work, creating doubt, confusion." "Is it? Then why do you recognize trails you've never walked? Why do you know exactly which floorboard creaks when stepped on? Why did you come back at all?" I stood, moving toward the door, poker in hand. "To end this. You can't end something that's part of you any more than Watson could or Black would." The voice changed, becoming a chorus of many. "We've waited patiently. The territory needs a guardian, one who understands the old ways, the proper boundaries. You were chosen." My hand rested on the door latch. Outside stood answers, resolution, one way or another. "Last chance, creature. Return what you've taken from me, or face me directly." A chuckle came, low, amused, unnervingly familiar. "As you wish." I threw open the door, iron poker raised defensively. Standing on the porch, illuminated by the cabin's light, was myself, perfect in every detail, down to the scars on my knuckles from a childhood accident. It smiled with my face, my expressions. "Now you understand. There's no separation anymore. Accept it, and the pain ends." I stepped forward, forcing it to retreat from the threshold. "You're not me. You're just wearing pieces you've stolen." Its smile faltered slightly. "The longer you resist, the more you'll lose. Already your memories fragment, your identity blurs. Soon you won't know which thoughts are yours and which are mine. Then I'll have to make this quick." I lunged forward with the poker. It moved with inhuman speed, dodging the strike and circling around me. As it moved, its form rippled, my features blending with others. Blackwood's jaw, Watson's eyes, and older elements, ancient and feral. "Every ranger who came before you joins the Guardian eventually," it said, voice shifting between mine and others. "Some fought, some submitted willingly. All serve now." The iron poker connected with its shoulder, eliciting a shriek of pain and a burst of acrid smoke. It retreated to the tree line, form fluctuating more rapidly now. "You can't kill me, Makya. I am this place. I have been here since before your kind named these mountains." I advanced steadily, gripped tight on the poker. "I don't need to kill you. I just need to reclaim what's mine." It snarled, dropping any pretense of humanity. Its form elongated, limbs extending unnaturally, antler-like protrusions emerging from its skull. "Then take it, if you can." It charged with blinding speed. I braced myself, poker extended like a spear. The impact drove us both backward into the snow. Pain exploded across my chest as claws raked through my jacket. The poker lodged deep in the creature's torso, producing a howl that shook the trees. We grappled in the snow, its strength nearly overwhelming me. Its face shifted continuously now, cycling through dozens of human features before settling again on a twisted version of my own. "I can give you what you've always wanted," it hissed, voice somehow in my ears and inside my head simultaneously. Belonging, purpose, power beyond human limits. Its offer resonated with something deep within me, the lifetime of feeling disconnected, of searching for meaning. For a moment I hesitated. In that instant, images flooded my mind, running with wolf packs through moonlit forests, watching human hikers from concealed positions, the thrill of the hunt, the satisfaction of claiming territory. These weren't visions of the future, but memories, not mine, yet somehow familiar. "You've already taken these experiences from me," I realized aloud. "That's why they feel like memories." Something shifted in its expression, surprise, perhaps even a flicker of respect. "Clever. Most never understand until it's too late." I wrenched the poker free and struck again, catching it across the face. "Return what's mine, all of it, now." It howled, more in rage than pain this time. "It's already happening. Every moment we touch, the fragments realign. That's why you came back. Why you had to confront me directly, the separation was killing you slowly. As if confirming its words, memories began surfacing. Disjointed flashes of my time at Blackrock that had been missing before. I remembered applying specifically for the outpost, driven by dreams and compulsions I hadn't understood. I remembered the photograph taken during a training visit years earlier, when Watson had been my instructor. The creature's form became less substantial as these memories returned, as if it were losing density. It retreated again, watching me warily now. "This changes nothing," it said, voice fainter. "You've reclaimed fragments, but you've been marked. You'll return eventually when the loneliness becomes unbearable. They always do." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, advancing steadily, "but that will be my choice, not your manipulation." It regarded me for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. Slowly, deliberately, it backed away into the forest darkness. Just before disappearing entirely, it spoke one final time. "The territory needs a guardian, Makya. When you're ready to accept that role properly, I'll be waiting." Then it was gone, leaving only disturbed snow and a profound silence. I stood motionless, poker still raised, waiting for it to return. Minutes passed. The forest remained still. Gradually, I became aware of a strange sensation, completeness, as if pieces of a puzzle had finally aligned. Memories continued to surface, filling gaps I hadn't even realized existed. Not all were pleasant, but all were unmistakably mine. The satellite phone in my pocket chimed suddenly, startling me. Signal had returned. Dr. Navarro's concerned voice came through immediately when I answered. "Makya, what happened? You missed 2 check-ins." "It's over," I said, surprised by the certainty in my voice. "At least for now." "Are you coming back?" she asked. I turned to look at the cabin, my post, my responsibility. The territory did need a guardian, though perhaps not the kind the creature intended. "No," I replied. "I think I need to stay." "Are you sure that's wise?" I wasn't sure at all, but I knew it was necessary. The creature had been right about one thing. I belonged here now, watching the boundary between worlds, maintaining the balance my grandmother had spoken of. "I'll check in regularly," I promised, "and I'll document everything. This story needs to be told properly." After ending the call, I returned to the cabin and began writing. This account, this warning, this invitation to understand. The creature remains in the forest. I feel its presence sometimes, watching from just beyond the tree line, waiting. I'm waiting too, but on my terms now. The territory has its guardian, but not the one it expected. My name is Makya. I hunt what hunts others, and I am not alone. I never thought I'd end up as a park ranger at Whispering Pines National Forest. After a decade working desk jobs in Portland, the call of the wilderness became too strong to ignore. My grandfather had been Navajo, though I never knew much about his heritage. Just fragments of stories he'd tell during our rare visits before he passed when I was 12. Perhaps that's why I felt so drawn to this remote outpost, nestled between jagged mountains and dense forest, where the pines truly did seem to whisper when the wind blew through them. The ranger station was a rustic cabin built in the 1930s, solid logs weathered to a silvery hue. My superior, Ranger Mackenzie, a leathery man in his 60s with a permanent squint from decades in the sun, had given me a quick orientation before departing for a 2-week vacation to visit his daughter in Montana. "Keep an eye on the weather, radio in daily, and remember, most rescue situations happen because people underestimate nature," he'd said, adjusting his wide-brimmed hat. "You've got the training. Trust your instincts." That first week passed uneventfully. I patrolled the trails, checked fishing permits at Azure Lake, and cataloged a few minor violations, mainly campers building fires outside designated areas. The isolation suited me. After years of office fluorescence and endless meetings, the soundtrack of wind through trees and distant waterfalls was therapeutic. The day everything changed started normally enough. I woke before dawn, made coffee on my small propane stove, and radioed in my daily report. The forecast predicted clear skies and moderate temperatures. Perfect hiking weather. Around noon, I received a distress call from hikers who'd found an injured man on the North Ridge Trail, about 5 miles from the station. I grabbed my medical kit, emergency radio, and set out immediately. The man was Australian, according to his companions, a group of 3 tourists who'd been hiking the famous peaks of the Pacific Northwest. They'd found him stumbling along the trail, disoriented and with a nasty gash on his forehead. "He's not with us," explained a blonde woman with a distinct Australian accent. "We just found him like this about an hour ago." The injured man was in his 30s with a short beard and gear that suggested he knew what he was doing in the backcountry. His name was Adrian, according to the ID in his wallet, and he was from Sydney. "What happened?" I asked as I cleaned his wound. Adrian's eyes, a startling blue, seemed unable to focus properly. "I was camping, heard something outside my tent. Thought it might be a bear." He winced as I applied antiseptic. "Went to check and I don't remember. I woke up like this, tent gone, backpack gone." I frowned. Bear encounters weren't uncommon, but they rarely resulted in missing equipment without significant damage to what remained. Bears weren't exactly subtle thieves. "Did you see anything?" I pressed. "Anything unusual at all?" Adrian shook his head, then immediately regretted the movement. "Just shadows. And eyes. Yellow eyes, I think." He shuddered. "And a sound. Not like an animal. More like someone trying to speak with an animal's mouth." The Australian hikers exchanged glances. "Concussion talk," one murmured. I wasn't so sure. Something about his description raised the hairs on my neck. Grandfather had told stories my parents had dismissed as superstition, stories about creatures in the woods that weren't exactly animals, nor entirely human. After patching Adrian up, I escorted the group back to the ranger station. Protocol dictated that I file a report and arrange transportation for Adrian to the nearest hospital for proper assessment. The Australian hikers decided to continue their journey after ensuring Adrian was in good hands. That night, after Adrian had been picked up by the local medical transport, I found myself unable to sleep. The cabin creaked and settled in the darkness, normal sounds that had never bothered me before. But now each crack of a branch outside sent my heart racing. Around 2 a.m. I heard it. A scratching at my door, light, almost tentative. Then a soft thud, as if something had been placed on my porch. I grabbed my flashlight and sidearm. The rational part of my brain said it was probably just a curious raccoon or perhaps a deer, but Adrian's words echoed in my mind. Eyes, yellow eyes. Slowly, I opened the door. On the wooden planks of my porch was Adrian's backpack. Not torn or damaged, just placed neatly, centered perfectly before my door. As if returned. I swept my flashlight across the tree line, heart hammering. The beam caught something at the forest's edge, a reflection, like eyes catching the light. Not the familiar green reflection of a deer or the small bright dots of a smaller nocturnal creature. These eyes were amber yellow, larger, and they didn't flee from my light. They stared back. For several long seconds we regarded each other, myself and whatever watched from the darkness. Then the eyes blinked and were gone. I retrieved the backpack and locked the door, double-checking every window. Inside the pack, everything appeared undisturbed: clothes, food, map. But wedged into the bottom was something that hadn't been there when I'd checked it earlier. A small pouch made of what looked like deer hide, containing a handful of white ash and small bones I couldn't identify. The radio crackled, making me jump. "Pine Ridge Station, this is Clearwater Base. We have a situation. Over." I keyed the radio. "Clearwater, this is Pine Ridge. Go ahead. We've got 3 lost hikers, Australians. Missed their check-in at Granite Pass Shelter. Last known location was heading north on Trail 22 from your station. Any contact? Over." My blood went cold. The 3 Australians who had found Adrian, who had left my station heading south, not north. Negative, Clearwater. They departed south on Trail 5 approximately 6 hours ago. Are you certain they reported heading north? Over. A pause. Affirmative, Pine Ridge. Their permit and itinerary clearly state northbound on Trail 22. Search team is mobilizing, but weather's moving in. You're closest. Can you begin preliminary search at first light? Over. I stared out the window at the now clouded sky. The forecast had promised clear weather for days. Yet now, heavy clouds had gathered, seemingly out of nowhere. "Copy that, Clearwater. I'll head out at dawn. Over and out." I placed the radio down and turned back to Adrian's backpack. The small pouch of ash seemed to mock me. A warning, a threat, I didn't know. What I did know was that something was very wrong in Whispering Pines. And somehow, I suspected that the missing Australians weren't lost. They'd been taken. The rain started just before dawn, a steady, cold downpour that would make tracking nearly impossible. I suited up in my weatherproof gear, packed emergency supplies, and radioed my coordinates to Clearwater Base. Standard procedure was to wait for backup during poor weather conditions, but those hikers had been missing for 12 hours already. Every moment counted. Trail 22 wound through some of the densest sections of the forest, areas where the canopy was so thick that permanent twilight reigned even on sunny days. In the rain, it was like entering a monochrome world where everything bled together in shades of gray and green. 2 miles in, I came across the first sign that something was wrong. A single hiking boot, high-end and nearly new, lay in the middle of the trail, not tossed aside or lost in a struggle, deliberately placed, pointing north like a macabre signpost. I photographed it, bagged it, and continued on, a growing unease settling in my stomach. The forest had gone unnaturally quiet. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush, just the persistent drum of rain on leaves and the sound of my own breathing. Near the 4-mile marker, the trail forked. The main path continued toward Granite Pass, while a smaller, less maintained trail veered west toward Azure Lake. It was there, at the junction, that I found the backpack. Like the boot, it sat perfectly centered on the trail. A quick check of the ID inside confirmed it belonged to one of the Australians, Evelyn Mitchell, the blonde woman. The contents were undisturbed: food, clothing, a journal with entries up to yesterday. But tucked into a side pocket was another small hide pouch, identical to the one in Adrian's pack. This time, I didn't touch it. "Mackenzie to base, over," I spoke into my radio, using my predecessor's call sign out of habit. Static answered me. I tried again, adjusting the frequency. Nothing but crackling noise. I was too deep in the forest, the ridgelines blocking transmission. I'd have to either return to higher ground or press forward and hope to re-establish contact closer to Granite Pass, which had its own emergency radio. The decision weighed on me. Protocol said to retreat and report. Instinct urged me forward. The rain intensified, and with it came fog, thick and clinging, reducing visibility to mere yards. I took the fork toward Azure Lake, tracking boot prints in the mud that suggested at least one person had gone that way recently. The lake itself was normally a pristine jewel, popular with day hikers and photographers. Today, shrouded in mist, it looked otherworldly and forbidding. The usually blue waters had turned slate gray, reflecting the clouded sky. On the far shore stood a small shelter, one of several emergency cabins scattered throughout the park for stranded hikers. Through the curtain of rain, I could just make out a flickering light inside. Someone had started a fire. Hope surged through me. Perhaps the Australians had simply gotten turned around in the bad weather and sought shelter. I made my way around the shore, calling out as I approached. "Hello, park ranger, is anyone there?" No response, but the light continued to flicker. The cabin was a simple one-room affair with a stone fireplace, basic bunks, and a small table with benches. As I drew closer, I realized the light wasn't coming from the fireplace, but from dozens of candles placed around the interior, creating dancing shadows on the walls. The door creaked open at my touch. The smell hit me first, an odd mixture of wet earth, smoke, and something metallic that made my nostrils flare. Blood. In the center of the room was a crude circle drawn in white ash. Inside it lay clothing, 3 distinct piles. I recognized a red raincoat one of the Australians had been wearing. All the garments were neatly folded as if their owners had carefully undressed before. Before what? There were no bodies, no signs of violence except for small droplets of blood leading to the back door, which stood slightly ajar. My hand went to my sidearm as I approached the rear exit. Through the gap, I could see boot prints in the mud, leading into a section of forest so dense it was nearly black even in daytime. I keyed my radio once more, desperate for contact. "Mackenzie to base. Emergency situation at Azure Lake Cabin, possible 1091V. Hikers' belongings found, but no sign of individuals. I'm in pursuit of—" "They're not here anymore." The voice behind me made me spin, weapon half drawn. A man stood in the doorway I'd entered through, tall, gaunt, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent a lifetime outdoors. He wore a Park Service uniform at least 2 decades out of date, the green fabric faded to almost gray. "Who are you?" I demanded, hand still on my weapon. "Kage," he replied. "Senior Ranger, Whispering Pines Division. At least I was, back when this place had another name." I'd never heard of him, but that wasn't surprising. The park staff had high turnover, and old-timers often returned to visit. "Did you see what happened here?" I gestured to the disturbing scene. "There are 3 missing hikers." Kage's expression remained impassive. "They weren't careful. They spoke its name around the campfire last night. I heard them." "Spoke what name?" He looked at me as if I were a particularly slow child. "Naldlushi, the skinwalker." The word sent an involuntary shiver through me. Grandfather's stories came flooding back, warnings about creatures that could take human form, that could lure people into the wilderness. "That's just a legend," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Kage moved further into the room, looking at the ash circle with a grimace. "Tell me, what did you see last night? Outside your cabin?" I stared at him. "How do you know about that?" "Because it's hunting you now, too. It's curious about you. You have the old blood." He pointed to my face, to features that hinted at my Navajo heritage. "It can sense that." "This is crazy," I muttered, but couldn't help glancing nervously at the open back door. "Look, I need to find these hikers, if you know something." "The Australian man," Kage interrupted, "the one with the head wound, he disturbed its territory up by the old burial grounds. It followed him to your station. Now it's following you." My mouth went dry. "How do you know about Adrian?" Kage didn't answer. Instead, he moved to the ash circle and knelt beside it, rubbing some of the white powder between his fingers. "This is wrong," he murmured. "The circle is incomplete. It couldn't hold what was summoned." From outside came a sound that stopped my breath, something between a coyote's howl and a human scream. Close, too close. Kage stood quickly. "We need to leave now." "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what happened to those hikers," I insisted, though my voice trembled. The old ranger's dark eyes fixed on mine. "They called it. It answered. And now, unless we move quickly, we'll join them." He pointed to the candles. "Naldlushi is strongest in darkness. It's drawn to fire, but fears it too. We need to reach your station before sunset." Another howl scream, closer still. Kage grabbed a burning candle and thrust it toward me. "Choose now, Ranger. Stay and meet what hunts in these woods, or come with me and maybe live long enough to understand." The rain had stopped, but the fog remained, curling around the trees like ghostly fingers. Something moved in that fog, a shadow darker than the rest, slipping between trunks with uncanny speed. I took the candle. We exited through the front door and began a rapid pace back toward Trail 22. Kage moved with surprising agility for his apparent age, navigating the slippery terrain without hesitation. "Don't look back," he instructed. "It tries to catch your eye first. That's how it begins to take hold." "What about the hikers?" I pressed. "Are they dead?" "Perhaps not yet. Naldlushi likes to play with its prey." I thought of the neatly folded clothes, the careful arrangement of possessions. Why take their clothes? It learns through touch, learns to mimic. The more it touches of you, the more it can become you. Another scream pierced the forest, this time recognizably human. A woman's voice filled with terror. It came from behind us, back toward the lake. I stopped, turning toward the sound. "That's one of them. We have to help." Kage grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "That's not one of your hikers. Not anymore." As if to confirm his words, the scream morphed midway, twisting into something inhuman that raised goosebumps on my skin. "It's trying to lure you back," Kage warned. "It knows your weakness, your need to help. That's what it uses." The trail ahead suddenly seemed endless, the familiar landmark strange and threatening in the fading light. My station was still miles away and darkness was coming, and something was following us, keeping pace just outside our vision. Night fell faster than it should have. One moment there was still gray light filtering through the canopy. The next, darkness closed around us like a fist. The small flame of our candle created a pathetic circle of light that seemed to emphasize rather than dispel the surrounding blackness. We'd been forced off the main trail by fallen trees. Too many to be natural, Kage had insisted. The skinwalker was hurting us, directing our path deeper into its territory. We need to find shelter, I said, checking my watch. It was barely 7 p.m., yet the forest was pitch dark. The station's too far. Kage nodded grimly. There's an old fire lookout tower about half a mile east. It's not on your maps anymore. How do you know these woods so well? I asked as we changed course, pushing through dense underbrush. He was silent for a long moment, navigating by some internal compass I couldn't fathom. I've been here a long time, he finally said, since before they called it Whispering Pines. Something about his tone made me hesitate. How long? Kage stopped walking and turned to face me, the candle casting harsh shadows across his weathered features. I came here in 1952, he said flatly. Fresh from Korea, looking for quiet, for peace. I did the math. If he'd been even 20 in 1952, he'd be well into his 90s now. The man before me was old, certainly, but not that old. That's not possible, I said, backing away slightly. Many things are possible in these woods, he replied, especially for those of us with the old blood. A branch snapped loudly in the darkness behind us. We both tensed. Move, Kage hissed. The tower is our only chance now. We half ran through the forest, the beam of my flashlight bouncing wildly across the terrain. Twice I nearly fell, only Kage's quick reflexes keeping me upright. The candle had long since blown out, leaving us dependent on artificial light that seemed to attract rather than repel whatever pursued us. The tower appeared suddenly, a skeletal silhouette against the night sky, rising above the tree line on a rocky outcrop. It looked ancient, the wood weathered to silver, the metal stairs rusted but intact. Up, Kage commanded, taking the stairs 2 at a time despite his age. I followed, hearing something large moving in the underbrush below. Something that breathed heavily, almost eagerly. The lookout cabin at the top was small but solidly built, with windows on all sides designed to give fire watchers a 360-degree view of the forest. Now those windows seemed like vulnerabilities, too many angles to defend. Kage immediately began emptying my pack, arranging my emergency supplies on the dusty floor. Salt, he demanded. Do you have any? I produced a small container from my rations. He took it and began pouring a line across the doorway and each window. It won't stop it entirely, he explained, working methodically, but it will slow it down. Slow what down? I asked, frustration building. You keep saying it, but you haven't really explained what we're dealing with. Kage finished his task before turning to me. In the harsh beam of my flashlight, his face looked hollow, ancient. Sit, he said. I'll tell you what I can. I settled onto the floor, back against the wall, flashlight balanced to create ambient light. Kage remained standing, gazing out into the darkness. The skinwalker isn't just a creature, he began. It's a corruption, a person who chose power over humanity. Among my people, our people, he corrected, nodding toward me. To become Yi Naldushi requires sacrifice, murder of something close to you. Family. You're saying it's human? I asked, struggling to process. It was, once. Now it's something else. Not fully animal, not fully human. A spirit caught between forms. And it's been here since before white men came to these mountains. The native tribes knew to avoid certain places. Your government built a park on top of them. His tone held no accusation, just fact. Usually it keeps to itself, but sometimes it gets hungry. Not just for flesh, but for essence, identity. Like the hikers, I murmured. Kage nodded. It collects them, learns from them, becomes them for a time. And Adrian, the injured Australian? A warning. It let him go because it wanted what was coming behind him. A pause. And because it sensed you, someone with the blood who might understand. I thought of the eyes watching from the forest edge, of the neatly returned backpack. Understand what? That some boundaries shouldn't be crossed, that some powers need to be respected, not controlled or destroyed. From below came a sound that turned my blood to ice, footsteps on the metal stairs. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Kage moved away from the window, positioning himself between me and the door. "How do we fight it?" I whispered. "You don't fight ye nald lushi," he said grimly. "You survive it." The footsteps stopped just outside the door. A soft scratching sound followed, like fingernails or claws trailing across the wood. Then a voice, a woman's voice with an Australian accent. "Hello? Is anyone there? Please help. I'm lost." My body tensed to respond, a park ranger's instinct to help overriding my fear. Kage's hand gripped my shoulder, keeping me in place. The voice came again, more desperate. "Please, I'm injured. I can't find my friends." "It's not her," Kage whispered. "Remember that." The pleading continued, the voice becoming increasingly distraught. Then, without warning, it changed, deepening, distorting, until it was my voice coming through the door. "Kage," it said, using my vocal cords, but with inflections I'd never use. "I understand now. Let me in, and I'll help you finish what you started all those years ago." The old ranger's face went rigid. "Ignore it," he hissed. "It's pulling thoughts from your mind, trying to find leverage." But the thing outside wasn't addressing me anymore. 58 years, old man, it said, reverting to a voice that was neither human nor animal. 58 years since our pact. Your time is running thin. Kage's expression transformed into something close to anguish. "Be silent," he shouted. The response was laughter, a sound like rocks grating against each other. I stared at my companion, new suspicion rising. "What pact? What is it talking about?" Before he could answer, there was a tremendous crash as something struck the door. The wood held but barely, splinters flying inward. Another crash, and the upper hinge gave way. Kage moved with startling speed, pulling a knife from his boot, a strange blade with symbols etched into the metal. From his pocket he produced a small leather pouch, similar to the ones I'd found, but larger. "White ash," he explained, dipping the blade into the pouch, "from sacred trees. It's the only thing that can harm it." The door shuddered under another impact. Through the widening gaps, I caught glimpses of what waited outside, not clearly defined, but wrong somehow, as if multiple forms were superimposed on one another. "When it comes through," Kage instructed, "aim for the eyes, always the eyes. It's where the human part remains." "What pact was it talking about?" I demanded, even as I readied myself for the attack. Kage's expression was stone. "Later, if we survive." One final crash and the door gave way completely. What entered wasn't what I expected. Not a monster, not a deformed creature, but a park ranger, complete with uniform, hat, and badge. A perfect mirror image of myself, down to the mud stains on my boots. Only the eyes were wrong, amber yellow instead of brown, vertical pupils like a cat's or snake's. It smiled with my face, revealing teeth too sharp to be human. "Hello, cousin," it said. "I've been waiting for you." Kage lunged with his knife, aiming for the creature's inhuman eyes. It moved with blinding speed, seizing his wrist and twisting until bones cracked. The old ranger cried out, but managed to slash with his free hand, drawing the blade across the thing's cheek. Where the ash-coated metal touched, the skin sizzled and peeled away, revealing not blood and tissue, but a darkness deeper than the night outside. The skinwalker released Kage with a furious howl, its form wavering like a mirage in desert heat. I scrambled for my sidearm, but hesitated. How do you shoot something wearing your own face? The moment's hesitation cost me. The creature turned, regarding me with those alien eyes in my familiar face. It spoke again, but the voice had changed, becoming older, with a cadence that raised the hairs on my neck. "Grandson," it said, in a perfect imitation of my long-dead grandfather, "you've come home, at last." My grip on the gun faltered. That voice, how could it know exactly how he sounded? The distraction was enough. The skinwalker lunged impossibly fast, and the world went black. I woke to pain, sharp, insistent pain in my shoulder where claws had raked across flesh. The world was moving, jostling. Someone was carrying me. Through half-lidded eyes I saw trees passing overhead, moonlight filtering through the canopy. I was being dragged, my heels leaving furrows in the damp earth. "Kage?" I croaked. A pause in the movement. Then a voice, my own voice, answered. "The old one stays behind. His debt is nearly paid." Cold terror flooded through me as memory returned. Not Kage carrying me. The other. The thing that wore my face. I struggled weakly, but my limbs felt leaden, unresponsive, not just from injury, something else, something in my system. Venom, the skinwalker explained, sensing my confusion. Not to kill, to prepare. For what? I managed to ask. It didn't answer, just resumed dragging me through the underbrush. I tried to focus, to take in my surroundings and look for escape opportunities, but my vision swam. The forest seemed wrong. Trees too twisted, shadows too deep. Was it the venom affecting my perception, or were we in a part of the park I'd never seen before? After what felt like hours, but could have been minutes, we stopped. I was propped against a tree trunk, giving me my first clear view of my captor. It still wore my shape, but imperfectly now, as if maintaining the illusion required effort. The edges of its form seemed to ripple and blur, and occasionally I caught glimpses of something else beneath the human exterior, something with too many joints, with skin that moved independent of muscle and bone. We were in a small clearing dominated by a massive ancient pine. At its base was a hollow large enough for a person to enter, leading down into darkness. Around the entrance, small items had been arranged in careful patterns: watches, jewelry, car keys, personal effects, trophies. Why? I asked, my voice steadier now as the venom's effects began to diminish. Why the hikers? Why me? The skinwalker crouched before me, studying me with those unnatural yellow eyes in my borrowed face. You speak as if we are separate things, it said. We are not so different, you and I. Both caught between worlds, both belonging nowhere. It reached out, tracing a finger along my jawline with an intimacy that made me recoil. The hikers were food, it continued casually. Sustenance. But you? It tilted its head, an eerily inhuman gesture despite my familiar features. You are potential. What does that mean? I asked, trying to keep it talking while I tested my bonds. My wrists had been tied with what felt like plant fiber, tough but not impossible to break given time. Your blood, it explained. The old blood, it calls to us, makes you sensitive to the in-between places. Haven't you felt it? The knowing when you're being watched, the dreams of running on 4 legs. A chill ran through me. I had experienced those things, attributed them to heightened awareness from ranger training or ordinary nightmares. Had they been something more? The old ranger made his choice long ago, the skinwalker continued. Traded years of service for knowledge, for protection of his bloodline. But his time ends with the new moon, 3 days from now. And me? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. It smiled my smile, but wrong, too wide, too many teeth. You will take his place, or you will feed us as the others have. Choose. From the hollow in the tree came sounds, whimpering, barely human. The missing hikers, still alive. The skinwalker noticed my attention shift and nodded appreciatively. They last longer when fear seasons their essence, days sometimes. Bile rose in my throat, both from the creature's words and from the venom still working through my system. I needed to stall, to wait for an opportunity. What about Adrian? I asked. The Australian you let go, why spare him? A messenger, it replied. A herald. Each cycle needs one, someone to spread whispers, to ensure we are remembered. Fear keeps us strong. It moved toward the hollow, gesturing for me to watch. See what awaits if you refuse our offer. Against every instinct, I found myself peering into the darkness. As my eyes adjusted, shapes became visible. Human forms huddled together, but changed. Their skin had a translucent quality, stretched too thin over bones that had begun to shift configuration. Their eyes, when they turned toward the light, reflected yellow, like animals. They were becoming like it. Not fully, perhaps, just enough to suffer. The skinwalker observed my horror with satisfaction. The transformation is imperfect without consent, without the rituals, but it serves our needs. Our? I questioned. There are more of you? For the first time, uncertainty crossed its features. Once, many. Now few. The old ways fade. The believers dwindle. Something like anger flashed in those inhuman eyes. Your kind builds roads through sacred places, brings noise and light where there should be darkness and silence. I felt a strange, disconnected pity. Whatever this creature was, monster, spirit, or corrupted human, it was a relic, a thing out of time. Like Kage himself had seemed. Kage. Was he dead? Or was he part of this, as the skinwalker had implied? You mentioned a pact, I said. Between you and Kage, what kind of pact? The skinwalker's form rippled again, my features melting and reforming like wax near flame. For a moment I glimpsed what might have been its true shape, a thing of angles and shadows, more suggestion than substance. Protection, it said eventually. He protected our territory from encroachment, from development. In return, we gave him years beyond his measure, and we spared those of his blood. Then why target me? If I have the same blood, the pact ends with him. A new guardian must be chosen. It leaned closer, its breath carrying the scent of pine and decay. And you are here, at the appointed time, as was foretold. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Had Kage known? Had my assignment to this remote station been chance or something orchestrated? I remembered Ranger Mackenzie's abrupt departure, his oddly specific warnings. The way he'd studied me before leaving, as if measuring me against some unspoken standard. The skinwalker must have read my thoughts on my face. The old ones always know, it confirmed. They feel the turning of the seasons, the approach of the changing time. From nearby came the snapping of branches, deliberate, loud, someone approaching without attempt at stealth. The skinwalker's head whipped toward the sound, its borrowed form fluctuating violently now, my features sliding off like water from oil. Kage emerged from the trees, bloodied but upright. In one hand, he held his ash-coated knife. In the other, a burning torch that threw wild shadows across the clearing. Release him, the old ranger commanded. He is under my protection until the compact ends. The skinwalker hissed, a sound no human throat could produce. You have no authority here anymore, old one. Your time is past. 3 days remain, Kage countered. 3 days until the new moon. Until then, the agreement stands. They faced each other, predators establishing dominance. I worked frantically at my bonds, feeling the fibers weakening. The standoff broke suddenly. The skinwalker lunged not at Kage, but at me, claws extended. Simultaneously, Kage threw the torch, catching the creature mid-leap. Its stolen image of me evaporated completely as it shrieked, batting at flames that seemed to burn too eagerly, too bright. In that moment, I saw it truly, not as a cohesive entity, but as fragments of identity cobbled together, human and animal parts merging and separating in ceaseless flux. At its core was something ancient, something that had never known a single, fixed form. Kage was beside me instantly, slicing through my bonds with his blade. Run, he ordered. Back to the tower. Don't stop for anything. The hikers, I protested, looking toward the tree hollow where the captives remained. Beyond saving, he said grimly. We'll be fortunate to save ourselves. The skinwalker had extinguished the flames, but not before suffering severe damage. Parts of it seemed to have burned away entirely, revealing voids where substance should be. It crouched, gathering itself for another attack. Kage pushed me toward the trees. Go, I'll hold it here. You'll die, I argued. The old ranger smiled thinly. I'm already living on borrowed time. Been ready to go since '89. Now move. I hesitated only a second longer before plunging into the forest, heading in what I hoped was the direction of the tower. Behind me, I heard Kage shout words in a language I didn't recognize, ancient words that nonetheless resonated in my blood. Then came screams, both his and the creature's, indistinguishable in their agony. I ran until my lungs burned and my injured shoulder numbed from shock. The forest around me blurred, trees and shadows merging into a tunnel I fled through without direction or plan. When I finally collapsed, unable to continue, I found myself at the base of the fire tower. Whether by chance or some subconscious navigation, I'd returned to our temporary sanctuary. I dragged myself up the metal stairs, every clang seeming to announce my position to whatever might be hunting me. The tower cabin was as we'd left it, door shattered, salt lines disturbed. No safe haven now. Still, it was elevated, defensible. I propped the broken door as best I could and took stock of my resources. My pack was gone, left behind at the skinwalker's clearing. I had my sidearm but doubted conventional bullets would have much effect on the creature I'd glimpsed beneath its stolen forms. What I did have was Kage's pouch of white ash, fallen during the earlier confrontation and now lying forgotten in a corner. I retrieved it, weighing the small leather bag in my palm. Not much, but perhaps enough. Outside, the night had grown preternaturally still. No wind, no animal sounds, just waiting silence. Dawn was hours away. Whatever was going to happen would happen in darkness. I settled with my back to the wall, gun in one hand, ash pouch in the other, and prepared for the longest night of my life. The attack didn't come with dramatic suddenness. Instead, the presence of the skinwalker announced itself gradually, first as a heaviness in the air, then as subtle movements at the edge of vision, finally as the unmistakable sound of something climbing the metal stairs, slowly and deliberately. I'd prepared as best I could. The remaining salt formed a smaller circle in the center of the cabin. I sat within it, Kaga's knife coated with ash before me. My sidearm seemed useless now, but I kept it close anyway. The void where the door had been darkened as a figure filled it. Not my doppelganger this time, nor any form I recognized. Just shadow-given dimension, details impossible to focus on directly. Looking at it was like trying to count falling snow. The mind simply couldn't process what the eyes reported. "Where is Kaga?" I asked, voice steadier than I felt. The shape rippled. "The old guardian has returned to the earth, as all must." Grief and guilt twisted in my chest. The man had died protecting me, fulfilling a pact I still didn't fully understand. "What do you want from me?" I demanded. "You already know." The voice seemed to come from multiple sources simultaneously, as unstable as its physical form. "The choice is simple. Become guardian or become sustenance." "And if I become guardian, what does that mean?" The shape moved closer, stopping just short of my salt circle. "You walk between worlds, protect our boundaries, ensure we remain undisturbed. In return, your life extends, your perception expands." "Like Kage, living decades past when he should have died?" "Yes." I considered the implications. "And the cost?" "There's always a cost." The skinwalker's form condensed slightly, becoming more defined, not human or animal, but something with intent, with presence. "Solitude," it said. "Separation from your kind. You become other. Not of them, not fully of us, between." The words resonated uncomfortably. Hadn't I already chosen solitude by coming here? Hadn't I already felt myself an outsider among people? And if I refuse? Then the cycle ends. We reclaim our territory by other means. A pause, heavy with menace. Less selective means. Translation, slaughter. The creature would no longer be contained, no longer bound by whatever agreement had kept it in check. How many lives would that cost? How many more Adrians and Australian hiking parties? "Why me?" I asked, playing for time, trying to formulate a plan. "Just because of my bloodline? There must be others with similar heritage. You were called," it said simply. "Your dreams, your restlessness in the city, your yearning for these woods. We have been reaching for you for years." A chill ran through me as memories resurfaced, recurring dreams of running through pristine forest, of seeing through eyes that weren't quite human. The inexplicable pull I'd felt toward this particular park, this specific wilderness. Had I ever really had a choice, or had I been manipulated from the beginning, drawn here like a fish on a line? The skinwalker seemed to sense my internal struggle. It morphed again, taking a form designed to disarm, my grandfather exactly as I remembered him. "Grandson," it said in his voice, perfect down to the slight raspiness from years of ceremonial pipe smoking. "You always knew you were different, special. This is why." Anger flared, cutting through my fear. "Don't wear his face. You didn't know him." "Didn't I?" It countered, eyes gleaming with ancient amusement. "Who do you think taught your grandfather about us, about the old ways? His guardian before him was ending, just as Kage's time ended tonight." My mind reeled. "You're saying my grandfather was guardian, protector, bridge between worlds?" The thing wearing my grandfather's face nodded. "The blood passes through generations, sometimes stronger, sometimes weaker. In you, it runs strong." Could it be true? I remembered grandfather's stories, warnings about certain places in the forest, certain times of day, instructions that had seemed like superstition but now carried new significance. Don't look too long at your reflection in wild water. Never call your own name in the woods after dark. If you hear something mimic a voice you know, walk the other way. The skinwalker took advantage of my distraction to move closer, testing the boundary of my salt circle. Where it touched, the salt blackened and sizzled. The choice must be made before dawn, it pressed. The time of transition is short. I glanced at my watch. Less than an hour until sunrise. What happened then? Would it lose power with daylight, or was that just folklore? If I accept, I said carefully, the hikers go free. Adrian stays safe. You don't harm anyone passing through your territory unless they directly threaten you. Its borrowed face split in a grin too wide for human muscles. Bargaining already. Good. You understand the nature of pacts. Do we have an agreement? I insisted. The prey already taken remains mine, it countered. But yes, the injured one is spared. Future travelers are safe if respectful. These terms are acceptable. I wasn't fooled by its easy acquiescence. There would be loopholes, gray areas it would exploit, but it was the best I could hope for. How is it done? I asked. This transfer of guardianship? Blood and ash, it said. Your blood freely given. My mark freely accepted. It extended a hand across the salt barrier, my grandfather's hand, but elongated, fingers too jointed, nails curved into points. I hesitated, weighing my options. Was there a third path? Neither acceptance nor destruction? Kage had fought it, had perhaps even wounded it significantly. Could I do the same? But to what end? Even if I somehow drove it off, it would return. And next time, it might not offer choices. The eastern sky was lightening almost imperceptibly. Dawn approached. The skinwalker grew impatient, its borrowed form wavering as it struggled to maintain the familiar shape. Choose, it hissed, voice losing its human quality. In that moment of transformation, I saw my opportunity. It was weakening with the approach of day. The ash in the pouch, the knife before me. I had weapons that could harm it. I lunged forward, grabbing the knife and plunging it toward the creature's chest. It reacted with blinding speed despite its weakened state, seizing my wrist. But in doing so, it fully crossed my salt circle. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Where before the salt had merely sizzled at its touch, now a reaction like electric currents surged through the creature's form. It convulsed, grandfather's beloved features melting away to reveal the shifting amalgamation beneath. I pressed my advantage, driving the ash-coated blade into what passed for its center mass. The skinwalker shrieked, a sound that splintered the windows and sent debris raining from the tower cabin's ceiling. Its grip on my wrist tightened until bones ground together. With my free hand, I seized the pouch of ash and flung the contents directly into its face, or the approximation of a face in its current chaotic form. The reaction was catastrophic. The creature released me, recoiling with such violence that it slammed against the cabin wall. Where the ash touched, its substance seemed to dissolve, leaving gaps in its being. It was coming apart before my eyes, unraveling like yarn from a sweater. Through the gaps in its form, I could see, or thought I could see, other worlds, other realities. Glimpses of forests both like and unlike this one, of shadows that moved with purpose, of eyes watching from impossible angles. The sun's first rays broke over the eastern ridge, spearing through the shattered windows. Where the light touched the skinwalker, it seemed to accelerate the dissolution. "You fool!" it roared, voice no longer singular but a chorus of rage. "The pact cannot be broken this way." "I'm making a new pact," I declared, standing my ground despite the supernatural hurricane raging around me. "My terms, my guardianship. Impossible. The old ways are changing," I interrupted. "As you said yourself, adapt or fade away." The creature's form was little more than tatters now, held together by what seemed like sheer will. Through the disintegrating mass, I saw a core of dense darkness, its true essence perhaps. "If you accept my guardianship," I continued, "it will be on new terms. You remain in your territory. You leave humans alone completely. In return, I protect your boundaries. I keep your existence secret. Or?" The question came as a whisper now, the entity's strength clearly fading. "Or we end this now," I said, gesturing to its dissolving form. "Permanently." For a long moment, only the sound of the wind filled the cabin, Then, slowly, the fragmented pieces of the skinwalker began to coalesce around that dark core, not reforming its previous shape, but gathering into something more cohesive, more defined. What stood before me now was still not human, nor any recognized animal. It resembled a shadow given limited substance, a suggestion of form rather than form itself. But it was stable, contained. "The terms are acceptable," it conceded, voice reduced to a dry whisper. "But blood is still required. The marking must still be made." I hesitated only briefly before taking Kage's knife and drawing it across my palm. Blood welled, bright in the dawn light. The shadow thing moved forward, less threatening now, but still alien, still other. It extended what might have been a hand, or paw, or something else entirely. Our essences met. My blood, its shadow. A cold sensation spread up my arm, into my chest, behind my eyes. Information flooded my consciousness. Boundaries to protect, signs to watch for, rituals to maintain. Knowledge that felt ancient yet familiar, as if I'd always known it but forgotten until this moment. Then it was gone, slipping through the broken door and down the tower stairs with liquid grace. In moments, only the stirring of pine needles on the forest floor indicated its passage. I sank to my knees, exhausted beyond measure. My injured shoulder throbbed, my cut palm stung, but something else had changed too, my perception. The forest around the tower seemed more alive somehow, more present. I could feel the boundaries the skinwalker had shown me, sense the places where its territory met the mundane world. My radio crackled to life, startling me. Search parties were being coordinated. The storm had cleared. They'd be coming for the missing hikers I knew would never be found. I keyed the transmitter. "Mackenzie to base. Situation update on missing hikers. Over." Lying came easily now. Too easily. I reported signs of the Australians heading north, away from Azure Lake, toward the next ranger station. I omitted any mention of Kage, of the clearing with the hollow tree, of the entity I'd both fought and bargained with. As I descended the tower to meet the approaching search teams, I caught my reflection in a shard of glass from the broken windows. For just an instant, my eyes flashed yellow in the morning light, a trick of the sun, surely, but the forest whispered otherwise. 3 months later, the tourist season was ending, fall colors painting the wilderness in fire hues. I'd settled into my role at Whispering Pines, earning reputation as a skilled ranger with uncanny ability to find lost hikers, or more accurately, to ensure they never strayed into certain territories. Ranger Mackenzie had returned briefly, observed me with knowing eyes, then requested permanent transfer to another park. "The air disagrees with me here," he'd claimed, but the nod he gave me before departing said more than words could. Adrian, the Australian hiker, had recovered fully, though his memory of events remained conveniently hazy. The search for his companions had been called off after weeks without leads. I had mourned them properly in my own way, with rituals that came to me in dreams. The boundaries held. The skinwalker kept to our agreement, and peace settled over Whispering Pines. But sometimes, on moonless nights, I would wake to find ash-white paw prints on my porch, a reminder that I was watched, that our pact was remembered. And sometimes when I patrolled the deepest parts of the forest, I would sense eyes upon me, not threatening but acknowledging. One guardian recognizing another. In those moments, I understood what Kage had meant about being between worlds. Not fully human anymore, yet not other. A bridge. A protector. The whispers in the pines spoke to me now, and I to them. The old blood had awakened, bringing both burden and gift. And so I remain, watching the boundary between worlds, ensuring that what walks in shadow stays in shadow, and those who hike my trails return safely to tell tales of the beauty, but not the secrets, of Whispering Pines. I never planned to become a ranger at Whispering Pines National Forest. The decision came after years grinding away at a corporate job that slowly drained my soul like a parasite. When I finally quit, my apartment walls seemed to close in on me day by day. I needed space. I needed wilderness. I needed purpose. The posting caught my eye while browsing government jobs. Park Ranger, Whispering Pines Outpost, Eastern Section. The description mentioned minimal supervision and extended periods of isolation, which most would find discouraging. To me, they were selling points. They gave me the name Ahanu at the outpost. The older rangers said it meant he laughs in Algonquin. A private joke. Rookies always got native names. Mine stuck because I laughed when a bear ransacked the supply shed during my first week. Everyone else panicked. I found it strangely beautiful to witness raw nature at work. My cabin sits on the shores of Lake Manitou, accessible only by a service road that becomes impassable after heavy rain. The nearest ranger station is 43 miles away. My communication system includes a radio, a satellite phone for emergencies, and an internet connection that works when it feels like it. The isolation suits me. The forest speaks its own language if you learn to listen. My Australian friend Jasper visited during my second month. We'd met years ago while backpacking through the Rockies. His easy smile and relentless optimism were welcome after weeks alone with my thoughts. "Quite the setup you've got," he said, whistling as he surveyed my small cabin. "Bit remote, isn't it?" The cabin wasn't much. A main room with a wood stove, small kitchen, desk area, bathroom, and bedroom. But the wraparound porch facing the lake made it feel expansive. "That's the whole point," I replied, handing him a beer from my limited supply. We spent 3 days fishing, hiking, and catching up. On his final night, we sat by the fire pit outside, watching flames dance under a blanket of stars. The forest was unusually quiet. "You feel that?" Jasper asked suddenly. "Feel what?" "Like we're being watched." I laughed it off, but I'd felt it too. A pressure, a presence just beyond the firelight. The feeling had grown stronger over the past week. "Probably just a moose," I said. "They get curious." Jasper nodded but seemed unconvinced. "The Aboriginal elders back home talk about spirits in places like this. Ancient things that don't like being disturbed." "You sound like Kenzie. She's all about the local legends." Kenzie was my Canadian counterpart who managed the Western Forest section. Her station was a 3-hour hike from mine, but we checked in weekly. She'd grown up near the forest and took the old stories seriously. Later that night, after Jasper fell asleep on the couch, I stood on the porch, staring into darkness. Something moved at the tree line. Just a shadow shifting against shadows. Too tall for a deer, too silent for a bear. A branch snapped, sharp and deliberate like a warning. Then nothing. The forest held its breath, and so did I. The incident report I found the next morning mentioned 3 hikers who'd gone missing last autumn in my sector. All experienced outdoorsmen. They'd described hearing unusual vocalizations before their disappearance. The report concluded they likely got disoriented during an unexpected snowstorm, but no bodies were ever recovered. After Jasper left, I began cataloging strange occurrences in a journal. Broken trees 15 feet off the ground, large humanoid footprints that didn't match any known wildlife. Low, guttural sounds echoing across the lake at dawn. I told myself there were rational explanations. The human mind constructs patterns from randomness when isolated. Yet, with each passing day, the boundary between rational explanation and something more primitive blurred further. My radio crackled one evening as I prepared dinner. Kenzie's voice came through, tense and rushed. "Ahanu, you copy?" "I'm here. What's wrong?" "That family at North Point campsite, they're reporting something circling their camp. They're frightened. Probably a black bear. I'll head over. They say it's walking on 2 legs and it's big." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. North Point was halfway between our stations, about a 90-minute hike from my cabin. "I'll check it out," I said. "Meet you there?" Static answered me. The connection was gone. As I grabbed my gear, a thunderous impact shook my cabin door. Not a knock, more like something large had slammed against it. I froze, flashlight beam fixed on the wooden planks, watching as the door vibrated with aftershocks. The rational part of my brain suggested a falling branch. But no branch would strike with such precise force. And no branch would leave behind what I found the next morning, a perfect handprint pressed into the wood, nearly twice the size of my own. Dawn broke with an unsettling stillness. No birdsong, no rustling leaves, just the gentle lapping of lake water against the shore. I examined the handprint on my door again, tracing its outline with my fingertips. 5 digits. Opposable thumb. Unmistakably hominid, yet impossibly large. I'd heard stories from veteran rangers about Whispering Pines. They called it a thin place, where the barrier between known and unknown wears transparent. I'd dismissed them as campfire tales meant to frighten rookies. Now I wasn't so sure. The North Point family had packed up and left before I arrived last night. Kenzie met me there, flashlight cutting through mist as she examined a series of depressions in the mud. "What do you make of these?" she asked, crouching beside what appeared to be footprints. Each impression was nearly 18 inches long, with 5 toe depressions clearly visible. Whatever made them walked bipedally, with a stride length suggesting something very tall. "Could be a hoax," I suggested, though I didn't believe it. Kenzie shook her head. "Hoaxers don't usually drag tourists from tents." "What?" She aimed her light at the remnants of a shredded tent. "Family says something grabbed their teenager through the tent wall. Kid has deep bruising on his arm, but managed to break free when the parents started screaming." My mind flashed to the handprint on my door. Did they see what did it? Just a silhouette, big, father estimated 9 feet tall. We followed the tracks until they vanished into rocky terrain. Kenzie was quiet on the hike back, but as we reached the fork where our paths diverged, she gripped my arm. "My grandmother was Cree," she said. She called them Wendigo. The tribes around here have different names, Sasquatch, Bigfoot. But every native nation in these mountains has stories about them. "You think that's what we're dealing with?" "I think something's out there that doesn't appear in our wildlife manuals." The forest seemed to close around us as she spoke, branches leaning in to eavesdrop. "Be careful, Ahanu. They're territorial, and you're in the heart of their territory." Back at my cabin, I dug through the station's archives, finding incident reports dating back decades. Patterns emerged: missing hikers, strange vocalizations, unusual property destruction, all clustered in cycles approximately every 7 years. We were in year 7 of the current cycle. My satellite phone rang that evening. My friend Miguel from the Phoenix Ranger District calling to check in. "How's life in Sasquatch country?" he joked. I didn't laugh. "That bad, huh?" His tone shifted. "Listen, I heard about the incident at North Point. News travels fast. Ranger community's small. You okay up there alone?" I glanced at my window, feeling exposed. "I'm managing. Look, we had something similar in Yellowstone back when I worked there. Official statement was unidentified predator activity, but unofficial consensus was what? Some kind of undocumented humanoid. Research team came in, set up cameras, found nothing. But the Rangers knew. We'd see them at night, just beyond the firelight. A sudden thump on my roof made me jump. "You still there?" Miguel asked. "Yeah, something's on my roof. Probably raccoons." But raccoons don't walk with deliberate, heavy footsteps. Don't drag something that sounds like claws across shingles. "I'll call you back," I whispered, hanging up. The footsteps continued, circling, testing. I grabbed my shotgun and emergency flare. Then the noises stopped, replaced by breathing. Deep, rhythmic breathing just outside my bedroom window. I remained motionless, barely drawing breath. The window glass fogged slightly from whatever stood on the other side. A low, rumbling vocalization vibrated through the walls, not quite animal, not quite human. The forest had sent me a message. This was not my territory. I was merely a visitor being tolerated. For now. Morning revealed another set of tracks circling my cabin. I photographed them, measured them, made plaster casts. The scientific part of my brain needed evidence, needed verification. I hiked to the creek 2 miles east to refill my water containers. The path showed signs of recent use: broken underbrush, disturbed soil. But these weren't human trails. The vegetation was crushed from above, branches snapped at heights no human could reach. At the creek, I found it, a crude structure of interwoven branches forming a shelter against a rock face. Inside lay a bed of fresh pine boughs and something that turned my stomach: shredded backpacks and torn clothing. Some looked recent, others had nearly decomposed into the ground. As I photographed the shelter, a rock clattered down the hillside behind me, then another. I turned slowly. It stood on the opposite bank, partially obscured by foliage. Tall, at least 8 feet, broad shoulders, covered in dark hair. The face remained in shadow, but I could feel eyes studying me with intelligence. Neither of us moved. The creature's chest expanded with each breath, massive and powerful. I slowly reached for my radio, and it responded with a low, warning growl that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. "I mean no harm," I said, though I knew it couldn't understand. But perhaps it did. It tilted its head slightly, considering me. Then it raised an enormous hand, fingers splayed, the same hand configuration as the print on my door. A warning, a greeting, a threat. Before I could decide, it melted back into the forest with shocking silence for something so large. That night, I called headquarters requesting backup. They denied my request, citing insufficient evidence and staff shortages. The regional director suggested I was suffering from isolation-induced paranoia. "Maybe take some leave," he suggested. "Get back to civilization for a while." But I couldn't leave. Something primal kept me rooted to this forest. Fear, curiosity, or perhaps the growing sense that I had been chosen for some unknown purpose. As darkness claimed the forest, I loaded my shotgun and placed it beside my bed. The rational world was slipping away with each passing hour. Here in the deep woods, older rules applied. Something had marked my door, tracked me, revealed itself to me. In the distance, a howl rose, long, mournful, impossibly deep. Another answered from the opposite direction. Then a third, closer to my cabin. They were communicating, planning. And I was at the center of their conversation. A week passed without incident. The forest returned to its normal rhythms, birds singing at dawn, squirrels chattering in the afternoon, owls hooting at dusk. I began to wonder if my mind had manufactured the entire experience. Then Wren arrived, my friend from Vancouver who worked as a wildlife photographer. We'd met years ago during a conservation project in Montana. His specialty was capturing images of elusive predators, wolves, mountain lions, bears. I hadn't told him about my recent experiences. I wanted an unbiased perspective. "This place is incredible," he said, setting up his equipment on my porch. "The light quality alone is worth the trip." Wren had brought advanced gear, motion-activated cameras, infrared sensors, audio recording equipment. For 3 days, we placed them strategically throughout my sector. If something was out there, we would document it. On the 4th night, we sat reviewing footage on his laptop. Hours of forest scenery revealed nothing unusual until we reached the recording from Camera 7, positioned near the creek shelter. Wait, what was that? Wren leaned forward, rewinding the footage. A shadow moved across the frame. Too quick, too blurred to identify. He enhanced the image, slowed it down. "That's not a bear," he whispered. The figure was bipedal, approximately 8 feet tall, moving with unnatural speed. Its proportions were humanoid but wrong. Arms too long, shoulders too broad. The face remained obscured. "Could be a guy in a suit," I suggested, though I knew better. Wren gave me a skeptical look. "In the middle of nowhere, besides the way it moves, no human moves like that." The camera had captured 4 seconds of footage before the figure disappeared. But it was enough to validate my experiences. That night, as Wren slept on my couch, I heard soft knocking on the cabin walls. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. It moved around the perimeter, systematic and deliberate. I woke Wren. "Listen." He sat up, instantly alert. The tapping continued, now at the back wall. "They're testing the structure," he whispered, "looking for weaknesses." "They?" A loud crack interrupted us, the sound of wood splintering. We rushed to the back bedroom to find a window frame partially torn from the wall, cold air rushing in. Something large moved outside, visible only as a dark mass against the night. Wren raised his camera, finger on the shutter. "Don't," I warned. "I think it provokes them." As if in response, a deep, throaty growl vibrated through the cabin. Not animal, not human, something in between, primal, ancient. We spent the night in the main room, backs to each other, watching the windows and doors. The creatures circled but didn't enter. By dawn, they had vanished along with any doubts about their existence. Wren left the next day, taking his footage and promising to return with more sophisticated equipment. I didn't tell him I suspected the creatures had allowed themselves to be recorded, that they wanted us to know they were there. That afternoon, a distress call came over the radio. 2 hikers lost near the northern boundary of my sector. I gathered my search gear and headed out, following their last known coordinates. The trail showed recent passage, broken twigs, disturbed leaf litter. But intermingled with human signs were other tracks, larger, deeper, following the same path. I found the first hiker 3 miles in, huddled against a fallen log. Her eyes were wide with shock, skin pale despite the warm temperature. "Annie," she kept saying. "It took Annie." Her name was Beth. She and her girlfriend had veered off trail to photograph wildflowers. They'd heard noises, felt watched. Then something massive crashed through the underbrush. Beth ran one way, Annie another. "I heard her screaming," Beth sobbed. "Then nothing." I radioed for backup and gave Beth water and a thermal blanket. "We'll find her." But as daylight faded, I knew our chances diminished. I left Beth at a designated pickup point where Kenzie would retrieve her, then continued searching alone. The tracks led me to unfamiliar territory, a ravine I'd never mapped despite months of patrolling this sector. The walls rose steeply on either side, creating a natural corridor. The air felt different here, heavy, charged, ancient. Night fell faster than it should have. My flashlight beam seemed to penetrate only a few feet before being swallowed by unnatural darkness. The ravine narrowed, forcing me forward. The smell hit me first, musky, primal, with underlying notes of decay. Then sounds. Low grunts, the cracking of bones, wet tearing noises. I switched off my light, crouched low, and crept forward. Moonlight illuminated the ravine's end, revealing a clearing surrounded by massive old-growth trees. In the center stood crude structures, frameworks of interwoven branches forming dome-like shelters. Around them moved massive shadows, at least 5 creatures of varying sizes. And hanging from a tree branch, Annie's backpack. I shouldn't have gasped, shouldn't have made any noise. But the sight of her torn equipment overwhelmed my training. 5 pairs of eyes turned toward me simultaneously, reflecting greenish-yellow in the darkness. One creature stepped forward, larger than the others, its head nearly brushing low branches 15 feet up. I backed away slowly, radio forgotten in my hand. The creatures advanced as one, not rushing, but moving with terrifying coordination. My back hit solid rock. The ravine walls offered no escape. The lead creature stopped 10 feet away, close enough for me to see details I'd try unsuccessfully to forget. Powerful muscles beneath matted hair, a sloping forehead above deep-set eyes that held unmistakable intelligence, long arms ending in hands that could easily crush my skull. It made a sound, not a growl or roar, but a series of clicks and deep vocalizations. Communication. Another creature emerged from a shelter, dragging something. With horror, I realized it was Annie, unconscious but breathing. They had kept her alive. The lead creature pointed at Annie, then at me, then made a sweeping gesture toward the forest exit. The message was clear. Take her and go. I nodded slowly, understanding the terms. They would release her, and in exchange, I would leave their territory undisturbed. The creature carrying Annie moved forward, depositing her roughly at my feet. Up close, these beings smelled of earth, pine sap, and something musky and ancient. Annie was uninjured except for scratches and bruises. I lifted her over my shoulder in a rescue carry, eyes never leaving the creatures. They watched silently as I backed away, step by careful step, until the ravine bent and broke our line of sight. I ran then, fueled by adrenaline, carrying Annie for nearly 2 miles before a search party found us. Annie would later remember nothing of her captivity. The official report listed her as found disoriented after becoming separated from her hiking partner. But I remembered everything. And I knew the creatures had sent me a message, a warning wrapped in mercy. This forest belonged to them. They had been here long before humans arrived, and would remain long after we departed. That night, lying awake in my cabin, I made a decision. I would not run. Whatever connection had formed between myself and these ancient beings, I would see it through to its conclusion. The forest changed after that night. Or perhaps I was the one who changed. Colors seemed sharper, sounds clearer. I began noticing details previously invisible to me, subtle paths winding through seemingly impenetrable brush, tree markings that formed patterns when viewed from certain angles, rock arrangements too deliberate to be natural. The creatures, I had taken to calling them the Watchers, maintained their distance, but never truly left. I would catch glimpses through the trees, hear their movements around my cabin at night, find their massive tracks pressed into the mud beside my own during morning patrols. Regional management finally responded to my reports, not with backup but with Dr. Lena Reed, a wildlife biologist specializing in large predators. She arrived 1 month after the Annie incident, skepticism evident in her clipped tone and dismissive questions. "You understand how this sounds," she said, reviewing my documentation. "Undocumented bipedal primates over 8 feet tall?" "I know what I've seen," I replied, "and I'm not the only one." I showed her Wren's footage, the plaster casts, the photographs of broken trees and shelters. Her scientific mind struggled against the evidence. "There are rational explanations for all of this," she insisted, though her certainty wavered. "Then let's find them," I challenged. 3-day expedition. You choose the direction, I'll guide." She agreed, perhaps hoping to prove me delusional. We set out the next morning, heading northwest toward an area where I'd documented frequent activity. Dr. Reed carried scientific equipment, thermal cameras, audio recorders, sample collection kits. I carried something more practical, my shotgun. The first day revealed nothing unusual. We hiked 7 miles, documenting normal wildlife activity, deer tracks, bird nests, beaver dams. Dr. Reed grew increasingly confident in her skepticism. "See? Perfectly ordinary forest," she said as we set up camp. I said nothing, knowing what came after dark. Night fell with unusual swiftness. We sat beside our small fire, flames casting dancing shadows against the surrounding trees. Dr. Reed took notes on her observations, occasionally glancing up to scan the forest with a mixture of scientific curiosity and urban apprehension. "Do you hear that?" she asked suddenly. I nodded. The forest had gone silent. No insects chirping, no nightbirds calling, the unnatural silence that preceded a Watcher appearance. "Probably a predator nearby," I said casually. "Bear or mountain lion." But I knew better, and part of me suspected she did too. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her thermal camera. It started with rocks, small ones landing around our campsite at irregular intervals, tossed from different directions. An old hunter's technique. Confuse the prey by making it impossible to track a single point of origin. "What's happening?" Dr. Reed whispered, scientific detachment crumbling. "They're letting us know we're in their territory," I replied. "They? What are you—" A vocalization cut her off, a long, low call that seemed to come from everywhere at once, reverberating through the trees. It was answered by another, then another, until the forest echoed with their communications. Dr. Reed's thermal camera captured them then, heat signatures surrounding our camp. 5, 7, possibly 10 creatures moving with coordinated precision just beyond the firelight. "Oh my God," she breathed, watching the screen. "They're hurting us." She was right. Each time we moved toward a potential exit, heat signatures would appear, blocking the path. They were containing us, directing our movements. "We need to show submission," I said, remembering my encounter in the ravine. "They're intelligent. They understand intent. You can't be serious. Do you have a better idea?" I slowly lowered my shotgun to the ground and stepped away from it. After a moment's hesitation, Dr. Reed set down her equipment. The largest heat signature approached, a massive figure that registered several degrees cooler than a human, but still clearly mammalian. It stopped at the edge of our camp, just visible in the dying firelight. Dr. Reed gasped. Scientific curiosity battled with primal fear as she stared at the creature. Nearly 9 feet tall, powerfully built, covered in dark hair, with a face that seemed caught between human and something older, more primitive. "Impossible," she whispered. "They can't exist." But it did exist, standing before us, studying us with eyes that reflected firelight like a predator's. It made a series of gestures, pointing at our camp, then toward the direction of my cabin, then making a slashing motion across its throat. The meaning wasn't subtle. Leave by morning, or don't leave at all. We spent a sleepless night back-to-back in our tent, listening to the creatures move around us. They didn't attack, but they made their presence known, heavy footsteps, breaking branches, occasional vocalizations. At first light, we packed quickly and headed back toward my cabin, following the exact path we'd taken the previous day. The creatures escorted us, visible occasionally through gaps in the trees, ensuring we left their territory. Dr. Reed didn't speak until we reached the safety of my cabin. Her hands shook as she downloaded data from her equipment. "This changes everything," she said, voice barely audible. "If they exist, if they've always been here." "You can't tell anyone," I warned. "Not yet." "Are you insane? This is the zoological discovery of the century." "It's their forest," I insisted. "They were showing us boundaries. What happens when research teams arrive? Hunters? Media?" She stared at me, understanding dawning. "You're protecting them." "Someone has to." The thermal images she'd captured were remarkable, clear outlines of massive bipedal creatures moving with purpose and coordination. Combined with Wren's footage and my documentation, the evidence was becoming irrefutable. Dr. Reed left the next day, promising to classify her findings pending further research. I knew what that meant. She needed time to decide whether scientific recognition outweighed the consequences of exposure. Alone again, I felt the forest watching me. My relationship with the Watchers had shifted. They'd revealed themselves deliberately to Dr. Reed, using me as an intermediary. They were communicating in their own way, perhaps testing how different humans would respond to their existence. That night, I left my cabin door unlocked and sat on the porch, watching the tree line. Hours passed in silence. Then, as the moon reached its zenith, a figure emerged from the forest, the same large male that had approached our camp. It stood at the edge of the clearing, neither advancing nor retreating, a boundary being established. It raised one massive hand, palm forward, not quite a greeting, not quite a warning. I mirrored the gesture, palm forward, acknowledging its presence. For 5 long minutes, we remained motionless, locked in silent communication. Then it melted back into the darkness, leaving me with the unshakable certainty that our encounters were just beginning. The journal entry I wrote that night contained one line: "They're not afraid of us. They're afraid of what we'll become." 2 days later, an urgent radio call came from Kenzie. Her voice crackled with static and something else: fear. "Ahanu, we have a situation. 3 hunters missing near Blackwater Ridge. Last radio contact mentioned large animals surrounding their camp." Blackwater Ridge, deep in Watcher territory, where I'd been warned not to return. "I'm heading to their last coordinates," Kenzie continued. "Meet me there?" I knew what awaited those hunters if they'd crossed the boundaries. I also knew what awaited me if I returned after being warned away. Yet I had no choice. Despite everything, I was still a park ranger. People were in danger. "On my way," I replied, gathering my gear. As I stepped outside, a dark silhouette stood at the forest edge, a watcher watching. It made no move to stop me, but its presence carried a message. Choose your side carefully. I shouldered my pack and headed into the deepening shadows, uncertain if I was walking toward a rescue mission or my own reckoning. Blackwater Ridge loomed like a fortress against the afternoon sky. The forest grew denser here, trees packed so tightly that sunlight barely penetrated to the forest floor. The air felt heavy, primal, charged with warning. I met Kenzie at our planned rendezvous point, a lightning-struck tree that served as a natural landmark. Her usually calm demeanor had been replaced with tense vigilance. "Something's wrong with this whole forest," she said by way of greeting. "Radio contact with the hunters stopped 18 hours ago. Their emergency beacon activated here." She pointed to a spot on her map. "That's right in the middle of—" I stopped myself. "The middle of what?" "Territory we should avoid." Kenzie studied my face. "You know something." It wasn't a question. After working the same forest for months, rangers develop instincts about each other. She could tell I was withholding information. "We need to approach carefully," I said instead of answering. "If they're still alive, they're probably not alone." We moved through the forest with practiced silence, following game trails that wound between massive trees. Signs of the hunters appeared gradually: boot prints, a discarded energy bar wrapper, a broken fishing line. Then we found the first blood spatter, dark crimson against green underbrush, Not a fatal amount, but enough to indicate serious injury. Animal attack? Kenzie whispered. I examined the surrounding area. No animal tracks, no signs of struggle or dragging. Just blood, then nothing. Let's keep moving. The hunters' last coordinates led to a small clearing beside a stream. Their campsite remained partially intact, a tent still standing, cooking equipment scattered around a cold fire pit. But the ground told a disturbing story. Massive footprints surrounded the camp, the unmistakable tracks of watchers. They had come from all directions, converging on the site. Among them were drag marks leading northeast. What made these? Kenzie asked, crouching beside a footprint nearly twice the size of her hand. Before I could answer, a scream echoed through the forest. Human, male, terrified. It came from the direction of the drag marks. We moved immediately, following the sound. The trail led to the base of a cliff face where the forest floor gave way to rocky terrain. The drag marks continued to a dark opening in the rock, a cave entrance partially concealed by hanging vines. Another scream emanated from within, followed by low, rumbling vocalizations that made my skin prickle. Stay here, I told Kenzie. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, call for emergency evacuation. Are you insane? We go together. You don't understand what's in there. Then tell me. There wasn't time. The screaming had stopped, replaced by an ominous silence. 20 minutes, I repeated, checking my shotgun. Not a second longer. I entered the cave alone, flashlight beam cutting through darkness. The passage descended steeply, air growing colder with each step. The walls bore markings, crude drawings depicting tall, humanoid figures alongside smaller human shapes. Some scenes showed what appeared to be hunting parties. Others, more disturbing, showed the tall figures carrying away human forms. The passage widened into a chamber where my light revealed the unthinkable. 3 hunters, alive but restrained against the far wall with crude bindings of woven branches and sinew. Before them stood 4 watchers, massive, primal creatures caught between world epochs. They turned as one when I entered, eyes reflecting my flashlight beam in eerie yellow-green. The largest stepped forward, the same dominant male I'd encountered before. It made a series of gestures, pointing at the hunters, then mimicking a shooting motion, then pointing to its chest, where a dark stain matted the hair. Understanding dawned. They shot you, I said aloud. They crossed the boundary and attacked you. The creature nodded, an unnervingly human gesture. One hunter found his voice. These monsters ambushed us. We were just tracking deer. But the evidence surrounding us told a different story. Trophy photos on a camera that had fallen from one hunter's pocket showed them posing with guns beside trees marked with Watcher territorial signs. They had come looking for the creatures, hunting them deliberately. I faced an impossible choice. These men had violated boundaries, attacked beings they didn't understand, yet they were human, my responsibility as a ranger. Let them go, I said to the dominant Watcher. I'll ensure they never return. The creature studied me, intelligence burning in its deep-set eyes. It made another series of gestures, pointing at the hunters, then at me, then drawing a line across its throat. A trade. Their lives for a promise. Yes, I agreed, understanding. I accept responsibility for them. If they ever return, you can hold me accountable. The creature considered this, then nodded again. It growled something to the others, who reluctantly moved away from the hunters. I cut the men free, keeping myself between them and the Watchers. Moved toward the exit, slowly. As we backed away, the dominant Watcher made one final gesture, pointing at its eyes, then at me. We see you, always. Outside, Kenzie waited with her rifle raised. What happened in there? What were those things? Get these men to the emergency extraction point, I said, ignoring her questions. I'll explain later. The hunters babbled about monsters, demons, Bigfoot, stories that would be dismissed as trauma-induced hallucinations. Few would believe them, even fewer would dare investigate. As Kenzie led them away, I remained at the cave entrance knowing I needed to complete this interaction. The dominant Watcher emerged minutes later, stopping several feet away. In the daylight, its features were clearer. A face not quite human, not quite ape, but something more ancient than either. A missing link that had never actually gone missing, merely hidden from a world unready to acknowledge its existence. It extended one massive hand, palm up, revealing a small object, a carved stone pendant on a leather cord. The stone bore the same markings as the cave walls. I understood the offering's significance, a token, a symbol of the pact we had made. I accepted it, placing it around my neck. The creature nodded once more, then turned and vanished into the forest depths. When I finally returned to my cabin that night, I found evidence of visitors. The door left ajar, contents undisturbed but clearly examined. On my desk lay a single pine branch arranged in a specific pattern that matched cave drawings I'd seen. A signature. A message. I submitted my incident report the next day, describing a rescue operation that located 3 hunters who had become disoriented after an encounter with unidentified local wildlife. I made no mention of watchers, caves, or ancient pacts. Dr. Reed called that evening, voice tense with excitement. "The thermal images are incredible," she said. "Clear evidence of undocumented primates. I'm assembling a research team." "Don't," I warned. "They've existed undisturbed for thousands of years for a reason." "Science doesn't work that way, Ahanu. If they exist, they must be studied, classified, understood." "Some things aren't ours to understand," I replied, fingering the stone pendant. "Some boundaries shouldn't be crossed. The university disagrees. We're scheduling an expedition next month." After we hung up, I stood on my porch watching darkness claim the forest. Shapes moved at the tree line, familiar now, almost comforting in their vigilance. I made my decision then, removing my ranger badge and placing it on the table. By morning, I would be gone, not fleeing, but moving deeper. The Watchers had chosen me as their intermediary, their human ambassador. They would show me their world, their history, their knowledge, and in return, I would help maintain the boundary between our worlds. Some would call it desertion, others madness. But standing there, watching ancient shadows move through an ancient forest, I recognized it as evolution, not physical, but spiritual, an acknowledgement that humans aren't the only intelligent species walking these woods. We never were. The pendant grew warm against my skin as night deepened. From the darkness came a now familiar vocalization, not a call of threat, but of recognition, of acceptance. I gathered only essential supplies, no phone, no radio, nothing to connect me to the world I was leaving behind. Just survival gear, my journal, and the quiet certainty that I was making the right choice. Dawn was breaking as I locked my cabin door for the final time. At the forest edge stood 3 watchers, waiting. The dominant male extended its hand in that same gesture I'd mirrored nights before. This time, I didn't just mirror it. I walked forward and placed my human hand against its massive palm, a contract sealed, a boundary crossed. Together, we vanished into the ancient shadows of whispering pines, leaving behind one world to enter another that had existed alongside us, unseen and undisturbed, since before written history. The forest had called. I had answered. And the watching never stops. I never imagined I'd end up as a park ranger at Whisperwood National Forest. The decision came after years working a soul-crushing corporate job in Seattle, staring at spreadsheets while dreaming of something meaningful. When the position opened at one of America's most remote ranger stations, I applied on impulse. 3 weeks later, I was driving my old Jeep up a winding forest road, belongings packed in the back, heading toward my new life. The Ravens Hollow Ranger Station sat nestled between ancient pines overlooking Lake Stillwater. My new home was a weathered cabin built in the 1930s, with creaking floorboards and windows that rattled when the wind blew. The isolation was immediate and overwhelming. No cell service, spotty radio communication, and the nearest town a grueling 40-mile drive. "You must be the new ranger," a voice called as I unloaded my gear. A man with a weathered face approached, his uniform faded from years of sun. "I'm Redwood, been stationed at North Ridge for 18 years. Redwood, real name Joseph Redwood, became my first friend in this vast wilderness. Over coffee on my porch that evening, he explained my responsibilities: trail maintenance, wildlife monitoring, search and rescue operations, and enforcing park regulations. What he said next stayed with me. There are things in these woods the training manual doesn't cover, he murmured, eyes fixed on the darkening tree line. Stories the locals tell, things I've seen myself. I laughed nervously. Like what? He didn't smile. The Anishinaabe people who lived here for centuries called this place where the shadow walks. They believed a creature inhabited these woods, taller than a man, covered in dark fur. Modern folks call it Bigfoot. He shrugged. Probably just stories. That night, I lay awake listening to the forest sounds, owl hoots, distant wolf howls, and wind through pine needles. But underneath it all was something else. A rhythmic sound like heavy footsteps circling my cabin in the darkness. I told myself it was just wildlife. Bears were common here. But deep down, I knew bears don't pace methodically, and they certainly don't stop outside your bedroom window, breathing heavily before melting back into the forest. My radio crackled at dawn. Morning check-in from Ravens Hollow, over. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Roger that, Ravens Hollow. Any incidents to report? The voice belonged to Maya Blackriver, dispatch coordinator at headquarters. I hesitated. Nothing concrete. Some strange noises overnight. Probably just forest settling in with you, she replied. You'll get used to it. My first weeks passed in a blur of routine tasks and breathtaking views. I documented wildlife sightings, cleared fallen trees from trails, and assisted lost hikers. I befriended Mason Brooks, a Canadian biologist studying wolf populations, and Imara Thornhill, an Australian photographer documenting old-growth forests. But something felt off about Whisperwood. Hikers reported strange vocalizations echoing through valleys. I found inexplicable footprints, far too large for any known wildlife, near remote camping areas. And increasingly, I sensed I was being watched whenever I ventured deep into the forest. On my 23rd day, I found the first body, a hiker, male, mid-30s, who'd been reported missing. Official cause of death, animal attack. But what animal tears a man's limbs off with such precision and arranges them in a circle around the torso? Looks like a bear got him, the sheriff insisted, though his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Redwood pulled me aside after the medical examiner left. It wasn't a bear, he whispered. This is starting. What's starting? His eyes met mine. The hunting season. It happens every 7 years. That night, a storm rolled through the mountains. Lightning illuminated my cabin in strobing flashes as thunder shook the walls. Between thunderclaps I heard it, something massive moving around outside, testing doors and windows. I clutched my service rifle, heart pounding. Then came 3 deliberate knocks on my front door. I froze, finger trembling against the trigger guard. 3 more knocks, louder this time. The doorknob slowly turned, but the lock held. Something slammed against the door with enough force to splinter the frame. I fired a warning shot through the window. The assault stopped immediately. In the silence that followed, I heard heavy breathing, then a low, rumbling vocalization that raised every hair on my body. Not quite human, not quite animal. As another lightning flash illuminated the forest, I glimpsed a massive silhouette retreating into the trees, at least 8 feet tall, walking upright. The radio stayed silent when I reported the incident. The next morning I found massive footprints in the mud around my cabin and claw marks gouged deep into my wooden door. Whatever had visited wasn't just passing through. It had come specifically for me. I'm telling you, headquarters isn't taking this seriously, I insisted, as Mason helped me board up my shattered window. The Canadian biologist had arrived that morning, concerned after hearing my distress call over the radio. Most ranger stations have bear problems, he said, hammering a nail with practiced precision. But what you're describing sounds different. I showed him the footprint castings I'd made, 18 inches long with 5 distinct toes. Does this look like a bear to you? Mason's scientific skepticism faltered. I've tracked every predator in North America. This doesn't match anything in the textbooks. That afternoon, Imara joined us, her Australian accent carrying across the clearing as she approached my cabin. Heard you had some excitement, she called, camera swinging from her neck. Her expertise documenting wildlife across 5 continents made her invaluable. I showed her the footprints and damage to my cabin. She whistled low. In the outback, the Aboriginal people speak of the Yowie, similar to your Bigfoot. I always thought they were legends until I found tracks like these in Queensland. Together, we formed an unlikely investigation team. Mason analyzed the footprint castings while Imara set up motion-activated cameras around my cabin and key trail intersections. I pored over historical records of the area, finding disturbing patterns. Every 7 years, Whisperwood experienced a spike in disappearances and animal attacks. The pattern stretched back to the earliest park records in 1932. The previous cycle had claimed 4 lives, all ruled as bear attacks, despite inconsistencies in the evidence. We were in year 7 of the current cycle. The indigenous stories mention a creature they called Misabe, I told them that evening as we gathered around my fireplace. The descriptions match what we know as Bigfoot, but with one key difference. The Anishinaabe believed it was intelligent, capable of mimicking human speech and behavior to lure victims. Like how it knocked on your door, Imara observed quietly. A faint pattering caught our attention, something small hitting the cabin roof. Just pine cones, Mason suggested. We stepped outside to investigate and found small stones scattered across my porch and roof, dozens of them. In the beam of my flashlight, I spotted a perfect circle of larger rocks arranged in the clearing, 30 feet from the cabin. That wasn't there this morning, I whispered. A branch snapped in the darkness beyond our light's reach, then another, closer. Something was approaching methodically. Inside, now. Mason's voice was tight with fear. We retreated to the cabin, securing doors and windows. I distributed weapons, my service rifle to Mason, a flare gun to Imara, while I kept my sidearm. The Anishinaabe believed iron repelled the creature, I said, remembering my research. Something about the metal being unnatural. Imara positioned iron tools, a shovel, fire poker, and axe, at each window and door. Whether it would help remained uncertain, but having some plan provided comfort. The radio crackled unexpectedly, making us jump. Through static, a voice emerged, distorted, barely human. Coming for you. Mason grabbed the handset. This is Mason Brooks at Ravens Hollow. Identify yourself. More static then. 7 nights, 7 souls. The transmission ended. When I tried calling headquarters, the radio returned only static. Hours passed in tense silence. Around midnight, Imara's camera alerts began triggering rapidly. On her laptop screen, we watched infrared footage of something massive moving between trees, just beyond clear visibility, staying in shadows. It's circling us, Mason observed, voice barely audible. The temperature inside the cabin plummeted. Our breath fogged in the suddenly frigid air. The fire in the hearth extinguished inexplicably, plunging us into darkness except for the laptop's glow. Then came the mimicry. Help me, please! A perfect imitation of a child's voice called from the forest edge. I'm lost. Next, a woman's voice panicked. Jason, Jason, where are you? Then my own voice repeated verbatim from my radio check that morning. It's trying to draw us out, Imara whispered, clutching her camera like a talisman. The voices continued for hours, a grotesque concert of human distress and mundane conversations, all harvested from previous victims and our own communications. When dawn finally broke, we ventured outside cautiously. The stone circle had been transformed into a spiral pattern. At its center lay a deer carcass, fresh, with surgical precision to its dismemberment. Most disturbing was what we found on my cabin wall, a crude symbol painted in what appeared to be deer blood. It resembled a human figure with elongated limbs. It's marking territory, Mason suggested, or leaving a warning. Imara reviewed her camera footage in daylight, finding one frame that made us gasp collectively. For a single moment, one camera had captured our visitor, a massive, fur-covered figure standing upright at the forest edge. Its face remained shadowed, but its proportions were unmistakably non-human. We need to report this to headquarters, I insisted. And tell them what? Mason countered. That Bigfoot is hunting us? They'll think we've gone mad from isolation. Then we gather evidence, Imara decided. Irrefutable proof. The caves, I suggested, remembering park maps. Local legends say the creature retreats to the Whispering Caves during daylight. The decision was made. We would venture to the caves, a 5-mile hike through dense forest, to gather evidence. What we didn't realize was that this was exactly what it wanted. We were walking directly into its trap. The Whispering Caves earned their name from the eerie acoustics, Even a whisper at the entrance echoed throughout the limestone labyrinth. We set out at midday, figuring sunlight offered some protection based on the creature's nocturnal activities. Park records show these caves were declared off-limits to visitors in 1967, I explained as we hiked, consulting my topographical map. The official reason was unstable formations, but I found internal memos suggesting multiple rangers reported unusual findings inside. What kind of findings? Imara adjusted her pack containing camera equipment. They don't specify. The reports were sealed by the regional director. Mason carried a tranquilizer rifle alongside scientific collection tools. His specialty tracking wolves seemed tragically inadequate for what we pursued, but his methodical approach kept us grounded. If this is a biological entity, it has needs: water, food, shelter. The caves would provide two of those, he reasoned. The forest grew denser and darker as we approached the mountain base where the caves nestled. Wildlife sounds diminished until our footsteps became the only noise. No birds called. No insects buzzed. The unnatural silence pressed against my ears. Everything's avoiding this area, Imara whispered, documenting the phenomenon. We found the first anomaly 2 miles in, a massive oak tree, its trunk and branches interwoven with animal bones and antlers. The macabre structure towered above surrounding vegetation. Some predators create territory markers, Mason suggested, though his scientific certainty had faded. This isn't natural behavior for any known species, I countered, photographing the grim totem. Beyond the bone tree, we discovered more disturbing signs: trees scarred with claw marks 8 feet above ground level, half-eaten animal remains positioned in unnatural poses, and most alarmingly, items belonging to missing hikers arranged in precise patterns across the forest floor. A backpack, a hiking boot with foot bones inside, a camera with its memory card removed. This is evidence of intelligence, Imara whispered. Calculated displays meant to intimidate. We should have turned back then. Every instinct screamed danger. But we pressed on, driven by the need for answers and proof. The cave entrance appeared suddenly, a gaping maw in the mountainside partially concealed by hanging vines. Cool air flowed outward, carrying a pungent, musky odor. That smell, Mason covered his nose, reminiscent of great apes, but more intense. We activated headlamps and entered cautiously. The limestone passages wound downward, widening into chambers where stalactites hung like stone teeth. Our lights revealed primitive paintings on the walls, ochre and charcoal images depicting tall, hunched figures alongside smaller human forms. These look ancient, Imara photographed extensively, but some appear remarkably fresh. In the third chamber, we found evidence of habitation, a nest-like arrangement of branches, leaves, and fabric torn from human clothing. Surrounding it were hundreds of personal items: watches, jewelry, wallets, hiking equipment, and disturbingly, a collection of ranger badges dating back decades. I recognized one immediately. This belonged to Ranger Coda Stevens. He disappeared in these woods in 2017. Mason examined scratch marks along the cave walls, notches grouped in 7s. It's keeping count, he realized. 7 victims every 7 years. A low rumble vibrated through the cavern, not quite a growl, not quite a voice. We froze as pebbles dislodged from the ceiling. That came from deeper inside, Imara whispered, camera rolling. We should have retreated. Instead, we advanced deeper, passing through a narrow passage that opened into an immense central chamber. What we found stopped us cold. Human remains. Dozens of skeletons arranged in concentric circles around a central stone formation resembling an altar. Some bones were decades old, others disturbingly fresh. This isn't predatory behavior, I whispered. This is ritual. A shadow moved across the far wall, massive and upright. Our headlamps caught nothing when we turned, but the sensation of being watched intensified. We need to leave, Mason urged. Now. As we turned to retreat, a boulder crashed down, blocking our entry passage. Not fallen, placed. The darkness seemed to thicken around us as our headlamps simultaneously dimmed. A vocalization echoed through the chamber, a complex series of clicks, growls, and something approximating syllables. Then English, distorted through an inhuman throat. 7. Nights. 7. Souls. We ran, finding another passage leading upward. The sounds of pursuit echoed behind us, heavy footfalls gaining speed, accompanied by rock being scraped by powerful claws. We emerged from a different cave opening a quarter-mile from our entry point. Daylight had never looked so beautiful, though the sun was already descending toward the horizon. It hurted us, Mason gasped as we ran through the forest. It could have attacked in the darkness but drove us out instead. Why? Imara questioned, reviewing footage as we moved. The realization hit me like ice water. It's not hunting just for food, it's hunting for sport, and night is falling. We increased our pace, but the forest had transformed around us. Landmarks I recognized appeared in wrong locations. Trails veered in impossible directions. We're going in circles, Imara realized after the third time we passed the same distinctive boulder. It's manipulating the forest somehow, I said, or our perception of it. The sun touched the horizon, painting the woods blood red. We were still 3 miles from my cabin with darkness approaching rapidly. From all directions came sounds of movement, branches breaking, undergrowth rustling. It's not alone, Mason whispered, tranquilizer rifle raised. As night fell, we prepared to make our stand, back to back in a small clearing, surrounded by the approaching hunters. And the woods fell silent, waiting for the true darkness to descend. Night in Whisperwood was absolute. Cloud cover obscured stars and moon, creating darkness so complete it seemed solid. Our flashlight beams cut pathetic swaths through the blackness, reaching maybe 15 feet before being swallowed. Stay together. Move slowly. Head east, I instructed, compass glowing faintly in my palm. My cabin lay approximately 2 miles in that direction, if we could maintain our bearing through the disorienting forest. We proceeded in formation, Mason at point with the tranquilizer rifle, me in the middle with my sidearm, and Imara watching our rear with the flare gun. Each step forward felt like moving through molasses, the darkness creating an almost physical resistance. The Anishinaabe believed these creatures could manipulate perception, I whispered. Make you see things that aren't there or not see things that are. Great time to mention that, Mason muttered. 30 minutes into our retreat, our flashlights began to flicker and dim, despite fresh batteries. The temperature plummeted until our breath clouded before us. Around us, the forest came alive with sounds, branches cracking, underbrush rustling, and those vocalizations again, complicated patterns of clicks, whoops, and guttural tones. They're communicating, Imara realized, recording the sounds. Coordinating. A rock struck a tree near my head with devastating force, splintering bark. Another narrowly missed Mason. Then dozens rained down from all directions, forcing us to run blindly through the forest. We broke through into a small clearing and found ourselves standing before a familiar sight, the bone tree we'd discovered earlier. Somehow we'd been turned around completely. Impossible, I checked my compass. The needle spun wildly, rendering it useless. They're hurting us again, Mason concluded grimly. A thunderous impact shook the ground as something massive landed 20 yards away, dropping from the canopy above. Our lights caught only glimpses, massive limbs, dark fur, a shape at least 8 feet tall, moving with uncanny speed behind the tree line. More impacts followed as shapes descended from above, surrounding our position. Run! I shouted, firing my sidearm into the darkness. We fled blindly, separating in the chaos. The sounds of pursuit focused on me, heavy footfalls, and that horrible almost speech following close behind. I crashed through underbrush, branches whipping my face, lungs burning as I pushed beyond exhaustion. A root caught my foot, sending me sprawling into a ravine. I tumbled down the slope, landing hard at the bottom. Pain lanced through my leg, something broken or badly sprained. I dragged myself beneath a fallen log, extinguishing my light. Above, massive shapes moved along the ravine edge, silhouetted against the night sky. They communicated in those complex vocalizations, clearly searching. One descended partly down the slope, so close I could smell its musky odor, like wet fur and something metallic, almost like blood. I controlled my breathing, pressing deeper into the decay beneath the log. The creature sniffed audibly, moving closer. A massive hand, more like a clawed paw but with an opposable thumb, reached within inches of my hiding place. A scream echoed through the forest, Imara's voice. The creature's head snapped up, and it retreated, racing toward the sound with alarming speed. I waited 10 agonizing minutes before crawling from hiding, using a branch as a makeshift crutch. I needed to find my friends, but first needed to reorient myself. Climbing partway up the ravine offered a vantage point where, through a break in the trees, I spotted the ranger station's communication tower light blinking about a mile northeast. Moving as quietly as possible with my injured leg, I made slow progress toward the station. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound amplified in my hyper-alert state. Twice I froze as massive shapes crossed my path in the distance, moving with purpose. I found Mason first. He was sitting with his back against a lightning-struck tree, tranquilizer rifle broken across his knees. "They came from everywhere," he whispered, eyes wide with shock. "I hit one with enough ketamine to drop a bull elephant. It didn't even slow down." "Where's Imara?" I asked. His eyes met mine. "They took her." She shot a flare right into one's face. It screeched but didn't retreat. Just grabbed her and his voice broke. It moved impossibly fast, up into the trees. We had to continue moving. I helped Mason to his feet, and we pushed toward my cabin, guided by the distant tower light. The forest had gone unnaturally quiet again. "They're watching," Mason whispered, "playing with us." When we finally glimpsed my cabin through the trees, relief washed over us until we saw what awaited. 3 massive figures stood in my clearing, gathered around something on the ground. As we watched from the concealment of underbrush, they manipulated objects with disturbing dexterity. "They're setting traps," Mason realized. The creatures worked methodically, using tools fashioned from branches and stones. Their movements displayed intelligence and planning. Most disturbing was their physical appearance, now partially visible in the ambient light from my cabin windows, between 7 and 9 feet tall, covered in dark fur, with distinctly non-human proportions. Arms too long, legs bent differently, heads shaped wrong with no visible neck. "We need a distraction," I whispered. "What did the old stories say repels them? Iron." I nodded. "And fire." They seemed to avoid light. Using Mason's lighter, we set fire to a bundle of dry brush, then threw my iron knife into the diesel fuel barrel at the edge of the clearing. The resulting explosion sent flames 30 feet into the air as fuel sprayed across the clearing. The creatures reacted with alarm, emitting high-pitched screams and retreating into the forest. We used the distraction to make a dash for the cabin, locking ourselves inside. "Radio headquarters," Mason gasped as I barricaded the door. I tried repeatedly, receiving only static. Looking outside, I saw the communication tower's light no longer blinking. They had disabled it somehow. We quickly inventoried our resources. My shotgun with limited ammunition, flares, iron tools, and enough food for several days if necessary. I activated the emergency transponder, though help would take hours to arrive, assuming the signal reached headquarters. "What about Imara?" Mason asked the question weighing on both our minds. "If she's alive, we'll find her," I promised, though uncertainty gnawed at me. As if answering our concern, something hit the cabin roof with a thud, then another impact. We looked up as dust filtered down from the ceiling. Another thud, directly above the living room. Mason raised the shotgun toward the ceiling. "They're on the roof." A high-pitched keening sound filled the air, multiple voices creating a discordant chorus that made our teeth ache and vision blur. The psychological effect was immediate and debilitating, like needles behind the eyes. Then Imara's voice called from outside. "Help me, please, I got away, but I'm hurt." Mason moved toward the door, but I grabbed his arm. "It's not her. Remember the mimicry." The voice changed, becoming angry. "Let me in. They're coming back." Then my own voice. "Mason, open the door. It's safe now." We retreated to the back room as something massive slammed against the front door repeatedly. The windows shattered inward as long, powerful arms reached through, grasping at us. Wood splintered as the front door began to give way. Through the widening gaps we glimpsed fur, claws, and glinting eyes, reflecting firelight like a predator's. In the moment before the door collapsed entirely, the forest erupted with gunfire. Powerful spotlights swept the clearing as multiple voices shouted commands. The creatures retreated instantly, melting into the darkness with supernatural speed. "Park Service! Identify yourselves!" a commanding voice called. "Rangers!" I shouted back. "We're Rangers!" The cavalry had arrived, a fully armed emergency response team. As they secured the perimeter, a familiar figure stepped through the broken doorway. Redwood. "Told you it was starting," he said grimly. "Now we end it." Dawn broke over Whisperwood as the emergency response team established a defensive perimeter around my cabin. 12 Rangers armed with rifles and tracking equipment prepared for what Redwood called the containment protocol, a procedure absent from any official ranger manual. "Every 7 years they emerge from the deep forest to hunt," Redwood explained as a medic treated my injured leg. "The Park Service has managed the situation since 1932, keeping the public ignorant while minimizing casualties." "Managed?" Mason's voice dripped with disbelief. "People have died." "Far fewer than would have without intervention," Redwood countered. "We've learned to predict the cycle and evacuate remote areas before it begins. Sometimes we're too late." I struggled to process the revelation. "You knew when you met me. You knew what was happening and said nothing." Redwood's weathered face showed genuine regret. "Standard procedure. New Rangers aren't briefed unless absolutely necessary. Most complete their service without ever knowing." "What about Imara?" I demanded. A grim expression crossed his face. "We'll search, but if they've taken her to their territory..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Operation Leader Captain Adina Rivers outlined the plan. "We've identified 3 cave systems serving as their primary nesting sites. Teams will deploy sonic deterrents and specialized incendiary devices designed to drive them deeper into the wilderness, beyond park boundaries." "You're not trying to capture or kill them?" Mason asked incredulously. Rivers fixed him with a hard stare. "Previous attempts ended catastrophically. These creatures are stronger, faster, and more intelligent than anything you can imagine. Our priority is containment and survivor recovery." I insisted on joining the search for Imara despite my injury. Rivers reluctantly agreed, partnering me with Redwood and 2 combat-experienced rangers named Kai and Brenna. Our assignment? The central cave system we'd explored yesterday. As we prepared to depart, Rivers handed me a strange-looking device resembling a cattle prod. "Ultrasonic disruption tool. The creature's hearing operates at different frequencies than ours. This will disorient them temporarily, enough to create escape opportunities." Our team moved out at midday, traveling in a reinforced vehicle until the terrain forced us to continue on foot. The forest felt different in daylight, less menacing but no less alien. Evidence of the creature's passage surrounded us: broken branches, disturbed earth, and occasional blood smears on tree trunks. "They're normally nocturnal," Redwood explained as we hiked. "Daylight weakens them somewhat, affecting their perception abilities." "What exactly are they?" I finally asked the question that had haunted me. Redwood's response was unexpected. "The official position is unknown primate species. Unofficially, they've been here longer than us. The Anishinaabe called them the first people, beings that walked these lands before humans arrived." "You're suggesting they're intelligent," I pressed. "More than intelligent," he confirmed. "They possess knowledge and abilities beyond our understanding. The mimicry, the psychological warfare, the sophisticated hunting techniques, these aren't instinctual behaviors." We reached the cave entrance by mid-afternoon. Unlike yesterday, the opening was now partially blocked by strategically placed boulders, a defensive measure erected after our escape. Kai deployed a small drone to scout the interior while we prepared our equipment. The thermal imaging revealed multiple heat signatures deep within the cave system, several large forms and one smaller human-sized signature. "She's alive," I breathed, hope resurging. Rivers' voice crackled over our radio. "Team 2 reports heavy resistance at the northern caves. Multiple creatures, highly aggressive. Proceed with extreme caution." We entered the caves in tight formation, powerful UV spotlights illuminating our path. The passages showed signs of recent activity, fresh claw marks and disturbing arrangements of bones marking our route. The central chamber had been transformed since our previous visit. The altar-like formation now featured elaborate arrangements of stones, bones, and personal items from victims, including Imara's camera and jacket positioned prominently. "It's a statement," Brenna observed. "They're displaying their trophies." "Or leaving us a message," Redwood suggested. A faint sound echoed from a passage we hadn't explored previously, something between a whimper and a word. We followed cautiously, UV lights revealing phosphorescent fungi growing along the walls. creating an eerie blue glow. The passage opened into a smaller chamber where we found Imara. She sat against the wall, physically unharmed, but in a catatonic state, eyes fixed on the cave wall where elaborate symbols had been carved. Imara, I approached slowly, touching her shoulder. No response. Psychological trauma, Kai suggested, checking her vital signs. Seen it before in survivors. They can induce a fear state so profound it shuts down higher brain functions. As we prepared to move her, a low rumble vibrated through the chamber. Dust and small stones cascaded from the ceiling. They're collapsing the tunnels, Redwood realized, cutting off our retreat. We moved quickly, Kai carrying Imara as we navigated back toward the main chamber. The rumbling intensified, entire passages sealing behind us as we fled. In the central chamber, we found our primary exit blocked by fallen rock. Redwood identified an alternative route, a narrow passage leading upward that might reach the surface. As we entered this new passage, the first creature attacked, dropping from a hidden recess in the ceiling. It landed on Brenna, powerful hands closing around her throat. The UV light revealed its features in horrifying detail, a face not quite ape, not quite human, with deep-set eyes showing terrible intelligence. Kai fired his rifle, the bullet striking the creature's chest. It released Brenna, staggering backward but remaining upright. I activated the ultrasonic device, pointing it directly at the being. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The creature clutched its misshapen head, emitting a high-pitched keening sound that echoed painfully through the chamber. It retreated into darkness, movements uncoordinated. "Move," Redwood commanded, helping Brenna to her feet. Blood streamed from claw marks across her chest, but she could walk. We pushed upward through increasingly narrow passages, the sounds of pursuit growing behind us. The creatures had recovered and were gaining rapidly. The passage ended at a vertical shaft with crude handholds carved into the rock. Sunlight filtered down from an opening 30 feet above, our escape route. "I'll take Imara first," Kai said, securing her to his back with climbing gear. He began ascending swiftly. Brenna went next, moving slowly due to her injuries. Redwood and I prepared to defend the passage while they climbed. The first creature appeared at the passage entrance, larger than the others, its fur streaked with gray. Behind it, more shapes moved in the darkness. "That's their leader," Redwood whispered, raising his rifle. "The one the Anishinaabe called Misabe, the grandfather." The creature studied us with unsettling intelligence, making no move to attack. Instead, it produced something from a crude pouch at its side, a ranger badge. My breath caught as it held up the badge, then deliberately placed it on the ground between us. The message seemed clear, a warning, or perhaps an offer. Leave their territory, and they would permit our departure. "They're learning," Redwood murmured, "adapting to our tactics." A voice from above called down. Kai had reached the surface with Imara. Brenna was nearly there as well. "You go next," Redwood insisted, eyes never leaving the creatures. "Together," I countered, unwilling to leave him. As if sensing our intention to depart, the leader vocalized sharply. The creatures behind it surged forward. I activated the ultrasonic device while Redwood threw a magnesium flare. The combined assault on their senses drove them back temporarily, giving us precious seconds to begin our ascent. We climbed desperately, the creatures recovering faster than expected. Powerful hands grasped at our boots as we neared the top. Kai and Brenna reached down, pulling us the final distance to safety. We emerged onto a forested hillside a half-mile from our entry point. Without pausing, we retreated toward the extraction point where River's team would meet us. Behind us, inhuman howls echoed through the forest. Part rage, part communication. They weren't pursuing, at least not immediately. "Why aren't they following?" I questioned as we moved. "Territorial boundaries," Redwood explained. "We've crossed back into what they consider neutral ground." At the extraction point, River's team helped load Imara into a medical transport. She remained unresponsive, though doctors later confirmed she had suffered no physical injuries. "Will she recover?" I asked the field physician. "Hard to say. Whatever she experienced created severe psychological trauma. Some survivors eventually regain normal function, others never fully return." As operations concluded and containment measures were established around the deep forest regions, Redwood pulled me aside at headquarters. "You have a choice to make," he said gravely. "Transfer to another park. Most rangers do after encountering them, or stay and become part of the containment protocol." "Why would anyone stay?" I asked. "Because someone needs to stand at the boundary. Someone who understands what waits in the darkness." 3 months have passed since that night. Imara was transferred to a specialized facility in Australia, showing small improvements in responsiveness. Mason returned to his wolf research, but in a different park, far from Whisperwood. I chose to stay. My new cabin sits at North Ridge Station, overlooking the deep forest where the creatures dwell. The containment protocols have driven them back to their territory, and the 7-year cycle has concluded for now. Park visitors hike without knowledge of what dwells beyond the boundaries we maintain. Sometimes at night, I hear those distinctive vocalizations echoing across the valley, complex communications I've begun to categorize and study. They're not just animals. Whatever they are, evolved primates, remnants of something ancient or something else entirely, they possess culture, language, and intelligence. And sometimes, when the wind is right, I catch words in their calls, actual English phrases absorbed from their victims or our communications. They're learning, adapting, watching, preparing for the next cycle. I record everything, building a knowledge base future rangers will need. The Anishinaabe lived alongside these beings for centuries before European settlement, maintaining an uneasy coexistence. Perhaps their approach holds wisdom we've forgotten. Last week, I found a carefully arranged pile of stones outside my cabin, not threatening, but deliberately placed where I would find them. A message, a recognition. Redwood says I've been marked, chosen as a point of contact between our worlds. "They remember faces," he told me, "and they'll remember yours forever." Tonight, as darkness falls over Whisperwood, I prepare for another night of vigilance at the boundary where modern human understanding ends, where ancient shadows still walk beneath the pines. And somewhere in the deep forest, they prepare too. Watching, waiting, learning. 7 years will pass quickly.